The pick is in.
With the first pick, the Tennessee Titans select Cam Ward, quarterback, University of Miami. Let's bring in host of Locked On Titans, Tyler Rowland, to break that down. So, Tyler, Cam Ward, is he worthy of that first overall pick, or do you feel like he's just maybe the best QB in a weak draft class?
Well, I think both of those things are true. He is the best QB in a weak draft class, but I also do think he is worthy of the number one pick. Now, is Cam Ward the certified number one overall pick like Andrew Luck or Joe Burrow or Trevor Lawrence were when they came out? No, but have any of those quarterbacks won a Super Bowl? No, it's the quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes, who was not drafted and wasn't the certified number one overall pick. So I think it's actually historically a better thing that Cam Ward isn't such a solid number one overall pick. But look, you watch the tape on Cam Ward, he has everything you want. He has a talented arm. He has the ability to throw from a bunch of different angles with his arm, and he has a generational knack for playmaking and creating out of structure, which is what all the top quarterbacks in the NFL do nowadays. So you take the on-field talent, you compare it or combine it with the off-field intangibles that Cam Ward brings to the table as a leader who's been to multiple schools and always endeared himself to his teammates in the program. He's a great person. He's a great player, and that makes him absolutely worthy of the number one overall pick.
And I love your optimism there, Tyler, but you're absolutely right. Both things can be true at the same time. Now,
Yes.
We have heard much chronicled, much talked about his questionable throwing mechanics and consistency. But for you, are those concerns? And if they are concerns, then do you feel like they can still be maybe addressed through development by the Titans?
Yeah, certainly. I think you can clean up the footwork, and that's going to lead to more accuracy. The feet and the upper body are obviously tied together. But I think overall for Cam Ward, it's just cleaning up the decision-making. He has that generational playmaking talent, but at the same time, he's made some very questionable decisions in college and put the ball in harm's way. I don't think lax at the NFL level. So the footwork and the accuracy, I think that'll come together because he's a hardworking guy. What I want to see improve is the decision-making and having the correct balance between, hey, I'm going to make the huge play and put on the Superman cape, and hey, I need to live to fight another day here. You got to know when to hold him and know when to fold him. And that's the real development I want to see from Cam Ward at the next level.
Yeah, and you talked about it. He becomes the fourth number one overall pick the Titans head coach Brian Callahan has worked with in his career.
Yes.
Peyton Manning, Matt Stafford, and you mentioned the other one, Joe Burrow. So quite a class of number one draft picks that Brian Callahan has had to work with. Where do you think Cam Ward could potentially fit in as it relates to how successful these guys are? Because to your point, we're talking about multi-Super Bowl winner in Peyton Manning, Super Bowl winner in Matthew Stafford, and obviously Joe Burrow, who's gotten to the Super Bowl. And by any stretch, it's not a stretch to think that he could win one as well.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I think it's a great level of experience for Brian Callahan, and things didn't go very well last year, but the Titans quarterback play was very, very poor. And I think Will Levis wasn't a fit for what Brian Callahan wants to do. Brian Callahan is a spread West Coast style offense. He wants to get the ball out quick. He wants to be on time. He wants to be accurate and precise. And all the things that you see Joe Burrow do in the Cincinnati Bengals offense. That's not Will Levis's game, but it is Cam Ward's game with his arm angles and his quick release. And he's so good in the short to intermediate areas of the field, especially over the middle of the field. He can kind of read the zones and fit the ball into tight windows. That fits perfectly with what the Titans want to do on offense. So I think from a schematic standpoint, the fit is absolutely fantastic. And then you add in that playmaking knack that Cam Ward brings to the table. It can take him to that next level of quarterback, which the Tennessee Titans have not had in quite some time.
Well, Tyler, you are hype. I am sure that there is a party going on somewhere in downtown Nashville.
It's always a party with me, Tanitra.
I know that. Now, you know what? I absolutely love it. I feel like we couldn't start this draft show off any better than with my guy, Tyler, because he always truly brings the energy, and a great day for anyone who's covering the Tennessee Titans. And speaking of that, for continuing coverage of the Tennessee Titans, be sure to subscribe to Locked On Titans wherever you get your podcast. Appreciate you stopping by, Tyler.
Of course.
For continuing coverage of the Tennessee Titans, subscribe to Locked On Titans wherever you get your podcasts. And for more on Cam Ward, let's hear from Locked On Canes host Alex Dono, who spent a lot of time covering Cam Ward up close.
Quarterback Cam Ward is expected to make both an immediate and lasting impact in the NFL. I am Alex Dono, host of Locked On Canes. Cam Ward at Miami in 2024 threw for over 4,300 yards, 39 touchdowns to just 7 interceptions, He set new school records in virtually every single season passing category at Miami, and it didn't happen by accident. Physically, Cam Ward can make every single throw. The arm talent is through the roof. There's not a window too tight for him to fit it into. He takes some chances, but that's when he produces some of his big plays. And the element that makes Cam Ward even extra special is his athleticism and also his instincts to extend plays, to get outside the pocket. He is physically very capable of running when he needs to. He's more of a pass-first quarterback, but he's got that in his bag as well. I think Ward is going to be a great one. For more on the Miami Hurricanes, check out Locked On Canes wherever you get your podcasts.
The pick is in.
With the second overall pick, the Jacksonville Jaguars select Travis Hunter, corner/wide receiver out of Colorado, presented by LinkedIn here. We have Tony Wiggins of Locked On Jaguars breaking it all down. Now, Wig, the Jaguars had to pay a pretty hefty price. This was originally Cleveland's pick. They move up from number 5 to number 2, give up draft capital both this year and next year. Let's start with the haul. It's only a 3-spot move up. Was this worth it to go get Travis Hunter?
Well, it's going to have to be, and they have to have a plan. If you look at it from a traditional NFL standpoint, you have a team with a pure number 1 receiver in his second year in Brian Thomas Jr. Very rarely do you see that team then trade up 2 spots, give up a first next year, a second this year, along with some extra change to go get another wide receiver. But this is different. Liam Cohen, Tony Boselli, and James Gladstone, they're not old school. They're new school. And new school means everybody that always sits there and talks about these draft picks and we're going to save draft picks. They said, no, we're going after the best player in the draft, and we're going to make something in Jacksonville the absolute best. And I think they got the best player in the 2025 NFL draft.
Now, I want you to sell me on that. Travis Hunter is the best player in the draft. Obviously, he can play multiple positions. That's what he wants to do. He's a generational prospect. We have barely seen anybody like him in NFL history. What made Jacksonville make this move for Travis Hunter, and what does he bring to the team?
I think what they're going to do is they're weaponizing Trevor Lawrence, and they're weaponizing the offense based on the vision that they have of what they want to look like. They got De'Ami Brown too, and they expect big things out of him, according to Tony Boselli, in the offseason. That's going to give them a serious triple-threaded wide receiver with pure speed and talent, and guys that can catch radius the ball, along with guys that can be runners after they have the ball in their hands. There's going to be no excuses. They added 4 linemen in free agency in the offseason. There's no more excuses. There's no other place to run other than the fact that they now have competent offensive players, a better offensive line to protect Trevor Lawrence, and better coaches to scheme up this offense.
There was a lot of talk if Jacksonville had stayed at 5, Wig, about maybe defensive line, maybe offensive line. Where do you see Jacksonville addressing their needs now? Obviously, with less draft capital than before, might be a little bit more of a challenge.
Well, it's going to have to be in the 3rd round. And to me, this entire thing was also based on James Gladstone knowing what his history is with the Rams and how much impact he has had over the years with them having success with their draft picks on day 2 and day 3. And I think that gave them the confidence in this particular draft that people said didn't have a whole bunch of big-time talent at the very top. Let's get the best player, and then I'll do what I normally do, and I'll address all of that other stuff later. We can get Jamari Caldwell in the 3rd round, maybe. We can find other guys in the 3rd round that we can develop. And not only, we've added now talent to the top of our football team, we injected a whole bunch of talent into the middle and the bottom of our football team. Now we're going to find guys that are the correct picks for this team with the limited picks that they have left, and see if all of these things can come together and rise this ship out of purgatory. And that's where they've been in NFL purgatory for most of their existence.
Jacksonville got a big-time talent. And for continuing coverage of the Jacksonville Jaguars, be sure to subscribe to Locked On Jaguars wherever you get your podcast. For more on Travis Hunter, let's hear from Locked On Buffs, who spent a lot of time covering Travis Hunter up close.
Colorado two-way star Travis Hunter is the most versatile NFL draft prospect we have ever seen. I'm Kevin Borba, host of Locked On Buffs. An NFL team who's getting Travis Hunter isn't just getting someone who could be a top-tier corner. They're getting someone who could be a top-tier receiver. Yeah, you heard that right. On any given down, he could go shut down a team's top receiver, or he could go burn the best corner in the NFL. It's just what he does. He played over 2,600 career snaps at Colorado alone. And this past year, he won 8 major awards, headlined by the Heisman Trophy. If you wanted an even better endorsement than mine, well, Deion Sanders himself said that Travis Hunter at this age is better than he was. So I think that's quite the endorsement from one of the legends of the NFL itself. So if you want more Colorado Buffaloes information, go check me out on Locked On Buffs and make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast.
The pick is in.
With the third pick, the New York Giants select Abdul Carter, edge, Penn State. Let's bring in Locked On Giants host Patty Traina to break that pick down. So, Patty, just about every mock draft, especially the last few weeks, had Carter going to the Giants. But for you, was this the right pick in essentially a do or die year for head coach Brian Daboll and GM Joe Schoen?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the last thing you want to see them do is reach for a player, specifically a quarterback, even though they desperately need a quarterback. The last thing you want to do is reach for one because, look, that's what got them into this mess to begin with. If you go back to 2019 with them reaching for Daniel Jones at pick number 6. So absolutely, you go best available. You help that defense, which, by the way, wasn't horrible last year, but it could use a little bit more firepower. And now they've got that in Abdul Carter.
And put a pin in that one, Patty, because I am coming back to that question around the position of quarterback. But as you mentioned with Carter, an outstanding pass rusher, elite initial quickness, what's the biggest upside for you that he brings to this Giants defense?
Position flexibility. I mean, this is a guy who last year played on the end, defensive end, and he was very dominant, but he also could play off-ball linebacker. So there's any number of ways that I think the defensive coordinator Shane Bowen can deploy him. You know, he could have, people ask me all the time, can they get him and Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns on the field at the same time? I think the answer is yes. They can do an amoeba defense. They can have, replace Micah McFadden with Carter on obvious pass rushing downs. So there's so many ways I think that they can do it. It's just a matter of how creative Shane Bowen can get.
And also how much would Shane Bowen appreciate, and I'm sure will appreciate having that many tools in the toolkit to be able to use on the defensive side of the ball and really for those guys to be able to get after the passer. Now, Patty, no matter what the Giants did with the number 3 pick, it was always still going to come down with quarterback questions if they didn't go with a guy under center, which obviously they did not at 3. So, quote unquote, what about the quarterback is going to still be the lingering question. That's kind of what's still out there. And I got to ask you, do you think the Giants are done in this round with that question out there?
I think there is a possibility that they will trade up. I couldn't tell you where. I think they've got to get ahead of Pittsburgh, who I think is 21st, I believe. But yes, I have heard that they are making calls. It might, depending on how far up they go, we could be looking at definitely the second round pick this year, possibly one of their thirds. And again, it depends on how high they go. It's either going to be that first third or pick number 99. And if they really want to sweeten the pot, throw in a pick for next year, because now, remember, they're competing with the Cleveland Browns for a quarterback. Cleveland Browns just got this whole big haul to move down with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So the Giants might have to dig a little deeper into their assets to move up if they want a quarterback.
Yeah, Patty, this year we had a little bit more of that quarterback drama coming higher in the first round than maybe we did last year. But yeah, I got a sense that you're onto something, that maybe the drama, especially with those teams you mentioned, looking at where the Steelers are and kind of even some other teams that might be kind of looming in the outing, if you will, in the offing. Maybe the Giants are going to want to get ahead of them, figure that out fast. Appreciate the time, Patty. For continuing coverage of the New York Giants, subscribe to Locked On Giants wherever you get your podcast. And for more on Abdul Carter, let's hear from Locked On Nittany Lions host Zach Sako, who spent a lot of time covering Carter up close.
Penn State defensive end Abdul Carter is the best overall prospect in this year's NFL draft. My name is Zach Sako, and I'm the host of Locked On Nittany Lions. What is a team getting in Abdul Carter? What makes him the best overall prospect? It's the versatility. It's the high motor. It's the football IQ. It's his game-changing ability. He can wreak havoc on any offense. Abdul Carter is the complete package. He checks off every single box. Do you have any injury concerns? Well, put those to rest, because Abdul Carter will play through just about any injury, as he did just that for Penn State late in the postseason. This guy does everything the team can ask him to. He can play defensive end. He can play linebacker. His specialty is just disrupting offensive game plans and getting after the quarterback. If you want someone that is relentless on the defensive side, if you want a franchise pass rusher for the future, you take Abdul Carter. For more coverage around Penn State football and other Penn State sports, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast.
The pick is in.
With the number 4 pick, the New England Patriots select Will Campbell, offensive lineman from LSU, presented by LinkedIn. Here to talk about that with me is Nick Cattles, the host over at Locked On Patriots. And Nick, seems like it was Will Campbell for a lot of people at number 4. That's the pick the Patriots make. They protect their young quarterback in Drake May. Why Will Campbell over some others that were available?
Number of reasons, Kevin. It got to the point where there was so much smoke, I started to not believe it. Like there was something going on. There was something weird happening. But yes, they've been talking about Will Campbell for a couple of months now, and there's plenty of reasons why. I mean, he's got the makeup of a player that Mike Vrabel loves, but it really starts with protecting Drake May. And this goes back years of just swinging and missing on tackles, drafting tackles too late, not signing the right tackles. It's been a mess for the Patriots at left tackle. So I think they felt, hey, we're going to stick and pick here at 4 because we feel very good about Will Campbell being that left tackle for the next decade. Now, whether or not they're going to be correct, we'll have to wait and see. But he checks a lot of boxes, Kevin, from makeup and finish and effort and work ethic and football intelligence and being a leader in the room. All of these things that Mike Vrabel has brought up, Will Campbell does, including playing, in their estimation, a premium position at left tackle.
Now, you mentioned that the Patriots have swung and missed in the position for a little while now. You mentioned some of the things he brings to the table. Do you believe that Will Campbell can be different than those others that they've missed on?
Well, look, I'm not an offensive line aficionado. I'm not going to break down the film and talk about hand fighting and all that good stuff, Kevin. But, from what I read, from what I've, heard and people that I've talked to, most people do feel like he can play left tackle. Now, the question is, can he be an elite left tackle? I think that would be a reach, no pun intended with the arm length questions. But I think he is somebody that can play at least average left tackle, if not above average left tackle. Usually when you're drafting 4th, you don't want to go for average to above average at left tackle. But with this draft specifically, with so many guys at that position having questions, I think they feel pretty good about it. So he's just got to solidify it. I mean, last year it was Vidarian Lowe. That was a debacle. Trent Brown before that, he was up and down, mostly down. They went out and they, traded for, they signed Chukwuekoror for, wanted to switch him to the left side. He literally quit football after week 1 last year. They drafted Caden Wallace in the 3rd round last season. They were going to swing him to the left side. He never got there, broke his fibula. So it's been a disaster at that spot. And really, Kevin, worst case scenario, if they've got to move Will Campbell inside the left guard eventually, I think they'll be fine with that. They just feel like they've got a guy who can play at a pretty high level on that offensive line.
Offensive line's the picket for the Patriots. Nick, we know have other draft selections they're going to use here to try to bolster that roster. Where are the other needs the Patriots have with offensive line now checked off, at least Will Campbell?
Yeah, wouldn't be surprised if they try to move back into the 1st round later tonight, Kevin. There's been some talk about that possibility, but you're looking at left guard could be something. The Donovan Jacksons of the world, if he's going to be available. You can look at wide receivers, certainly a big-bodied X receiver. They've been missing that element. And pass rush, you could always look at pass rush. Harold Landry is a little bit older. Anthony Jennings is really kind of a run stuffer, not necessarily a pass rusher. So you could always look at defensive end as well. I think they're going to be open for a lot of possibilities, but I would be surprised, Kevin, if they don't come out of the 2nd round with either a left guard or a wide receiver.
For continuing coverage of the Patriots, be sure to subscribe to Locked On Patriots wherever you get your podcast. For more on Will Campbell, let's hear from Locked On LSU, who spent a lot of time covering Will Campbell up close.
Simply put, Will Campbell is the greatest offensive lineman in LSU football history. I'm Matt Moscona from Locked On LSU. With this pick, Campbell becomes the highest drafted offensive lineman in the history of the program, surpassing Alan Faneca in 1998, who went 26th overall. Campbell showed up to LSU as a 5-star out of North Louisiana and lived up to the billing. He started every game of his illustrious career at left tackle, 38 starts, allowing just 5 sacks during that time. Campbell could play guard or tackle at the NFL level. In a one-on-one conversation that I had with him just a week ago, he said in all of his visits, not a single NFL team asked him about the controversial arm length conversation. He also was awarded the illustrious number 7 by the LSU coaching staff, given to the best player and a great leader on the team. Will Campbell is a plug-and-play starter anywhere on the offensive line, and if he stays healthy, could be a Hall of Fame caliber player. For more, you can check me out on Locked On LSU, wherever you get podcasts.
Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
The pick is in.
With the fifth pick, after a swap with the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Cleveland Browns select Mason Graham, defensive tackle, Michigan. Let's bring in Locked On Browns host Spencer German. Spencer, first off, how do you like the move by the Browns that essentially have them empowered to select a quarterback this year, next year, now with them owning 3 of the top 36 picks, of course, including this one, and 33 and 36?
Yeah, this is why we love draft night, right? You kind of come in with a plan. I think I recorded a short that was all set for Travis Hunter to be the pick, and then they throw you for your loop. So I always knew that trading back was on the radar for the Browns, and I think it just has a lot to do with where they're at as a team right now. In a rebuild, trying to sort of figure it out on the fly here. There's been a lack of talent sort of being added to this roster the last couple of years because they haven't had first-round picks, obviously, after the Deshaun Watson trade. So this feels like a smart move from the standpoint of, yes, they could have taken Travis Hunter, and I think it would have been a good move as well. He could be a transcendent player in the NFL level, especially with Andrew Berry talking about him, comparing him to Shohei Ohtani last week. He would have been that type of guy. But this gives you a chance to now add 3 guys in the top 36, really fill out this roster and supplement it with talent that you need to sort of get yourself back to competing at a high level. So, I think there's some shock initially of man, we thought it was going to be Travis Hunter for a month, and now it's not. But once that wore off, the dust sort of settles on this. And I think Andrew Berry did maximize the value of this pick by getting all the draft capital he did. And frankly, as you alluded to, putting yourself in position to, if you don't get a quarterback this year, maybe finding that franchise guy next year in a class that's supposed to be even better.
Yeah. And it kind of, when you're able to get that kind of capital and make those moves and shifts, it also puts you in a position where you really have more to work with, to your point, Spencer, both this year and even potentially for next year. And we know how difficult that AFC North is. So you need all of the opportunities to build your roster that you can get. Now, there have been some concerns about Mason's relatively short arm length, his ability to constantly create pass rush opportunities. Those have both been raised. But for you, what are most of the strengths that you've really looked at and said, hey, I like that about Mason Graham? What are some of those areas where you feel like maybe he can develop a bit more?
Yeah, I think the first thing that stands out on the tape is just high motor, really physical, really aggressive. And that's a perfect fit. Andrew Berry, we heard him speak a little bit ago on the pick, and he used the phrase Mason Graham, it fits our DNA, what we want to do on defense. Jim Schwartz is here. He loves to rotate guys in and out, but he loves guys who are going to be aggressive. They don't want guys that have to think about what they're doing. They want guys that can just go and attack. And that is Mason Graham to a T. I think there's so many moments throughout his college career that you can point to, but just this past season, the Ohio State game, his ability to wreck the game plan sort of single-handedly. I know there were some other good players in that defensive line for Michigan, but he was a force. You see that throughout his tape. So I think it makes sense to add somebody like that, especially alongside Myles Garrett. There'll be some room to improve. You mentioned some of the physical traits maybe not being 100%, but I don't look at that as something that's overly concerning. Listen, it's NFL talent, so you're not going to just be able to feast the way that you did. But I think what's nice for him is he comes into a situation where Myles Garrett gets most of the attention, and that's going to allow him early on in his career to be able to have an impact and make an impact pretty quickly.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Like, you have a Myles Garrett, so he's going to be double, sometimes triple team. That gives Mason Graham an opportunity. Also, Spencer, it gives him an opportunity to learn from one of the best, if not the best, to do it for going on a decade. So yeah, you got to love that pick, and you got to love that the Browns kind of have an eye for that type of talent. That certainly has worked for them, and being aggressive is seemingly going to work for them, I think, in this first round. But speaking of that, do you really think, with some of the holes that they still have to fill, that they're done for the night?
It's a loaded question because I think it's complicated. I mean, these things are fluid, right? Any draft night is. I sitting here right now, I'd probably tell you I do think they're done for the night, and they're going to sort of stand pat and then see what the situation kind of looks like tomorrow. You have the 33rd pick to start off the second round. And so, you can kind of sit back and survey and see who's left, and you get maybe the best player of what's left, right? Like, there's an opportunity that could be how it plays out. But I do think, like, if the right trade presents itself, if the right player is there, and he slips potentially into like the mid-20s, I could see Cleveland being aggressive and trying to go up and get somebody, especially considering the draft capital that they just added tonight and having that second round pick. You're still going to make a pick early on tomorrow. If you trade one of those and maybe package it with something else, maybe one of their third rounders they have this year, clearly they have been the team of the day in terms of making moves. They made the move before the draft started, and then they made the move when the draft did start too. So I wouldn't put it past Andrew Berry to consider all his options. That said, the Browns have only really traded up one time to draft a player in Andrew Berry's tenure. So I'm not betting against it, but if the right player falls, I definitely think it's on the table.
Yeah. And there's still some interest and some intrigue in whether or not, to your point, they're going to make that type of move. And there's still a lot of good players left on the board to see whether or not they even have to make such a move. Appreciate the time, Spencer. And of course, for continued coverage of the Cleveland Browns, subscribe to Locked On Browns wherever you get your podcasts. And for more on Mason Graham, let's hear from Locked On Wolverines host Isaiah Hole, who spent a lot of time covering Graham up close.
There is no better defensive tackle in this NFL draft than Mason Graham, the Michigan standout. I'm Isaiah Hole. I'm the host of Locked On Wolverines podcast, and I got to see Mason Graham up close and personal for the last 3 years. And listen, coming out of Servite in Anaheim, California, he had a big wrestling background, and that translated in a big way. He's a guy who can play both the run and the pass. He's a definite run stopper, but he can get that penetration. Might be the best defensive tackle Michigan has ever had, and it's a storied program when it comes to those interior tackles on that side of the ball. So many have come through the program, and he might be the best. He's got the ability to shed those offensive linemen unlike anything that you have ever seen, and there's a reason why NFL teams have been salivating over him. And let me tell you, he is an absolute he's a pleasure to watch. That's the best way I can put it. For more, you can check us out over on Locked On Wolverines. Subscribe to Locked On Wolverines wherever you get your podcast.
The pick is in.
With the number 6 pick, the Las Vegas Raiders select Ashton Genty, running back out of Boise State, presented by LinkedIn. Here to break this down with me, it's your boy Q, the host over at Locked On Raiders. And Q, seemed like this was a pretty big possibility for Las Vegas. Felt like this was the spot everybody had him going. Now that it's a reality, how are you feeling about the pick?
I mean, it's great now that it's a reality, right? I mean, because it seemed like it was so obvious for the longest that it almost felt like it was false, like it was fake, right? That they were throwing out something there just to see if there'd be a team to bite and kind of throwing a little misdirection. But all along, that was really the Raiders' pick. And now you give Geno Smith, you give Pete Carroll, you give Brock Bowers, you have all these weapons now on the offensive side of things. And so now you're starting to put something together. Obviously the work's not complete, but you just saw a guy go for all those yards in college. I mean, the dude was over 2,000 yards and like over 1,700 after contact. So, I mean, you're getting the best of the best. And this is a deep running back class. But, I mean, there's only one Ashton Genty, and now he's a Las Vegas Raider. I know Raider Nation is very happy about it, and that's a rarity when it comes to first-round picks for the Raiders. So, job well done by John Spytek and Pete Carroll.
The Raiders lost Josh Jacobs last offseason, and they struggled to fill that hole last year. Ashton Genty comes in, is going to pick up more than enough of that slack that Jacobs left. What does he bring to this offense that has a bunch of really intriguing pieces, including Brock Bowers, and as you mentioned, Geno Smith coming in as that quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, now he just brings a running game, right? I mean, because the Raiders were the worst rushing attack team in the league in 2024, and you've got to be able to run the ball. And we know that Pete Carroll has had a lot of success running the ball in his time in Seattle, even when he was at USC. So he brings a legit threat. And now a guy like Brock Bowers is not going to be double and triple teamed, and now they're going to have to worry about running the rock with Genty, and now that opens up the play action pass as well. So now Geno Smith has an opportunity to operate and have a lot of success. Look, Geno Smith can just put it in the belly of Ashton Genty and let him go to work, right? So there's a new weapon, a new toy for the Raiders and their offense. And again, now you've got back-to-back years where your first-round pick are the best at their position. You got the best tight end, and now you've got the best running back. So you're starting to put the pieces together. You know what wins in the National Football League? A lot of really talented players, and the Raiders are starting to pick up a couple of those guys. So back-to-back years, they've done well in the first round.
Yeah, they certainly got a talented one in Ashton Genty, but as you mentioned, Q, work is not done yet. Raiders still have some draft capital to work with. Where are they going to look now that Ashton Genty's off the board to Las Vegas?
I think they still need a wide receiver. That's someone that they'll look at. I think probably second or third round. They'll probably try to get Geno another target to be able to throw the ball to. The offensive line still needs a little bit of work, so I'm sure that's going to happen. I'll look for a small school offensive lineman, John Spytek, in Tampa Bay. He used to really do well with the small school offensive lineman, so I'm kind of looking for him to make a move there, maybe a little bit later on in the draft. And they could always use help on defense too, cornerbacks, linebackers, you name it, right? The Raiders have a lot of holes, but at least after round one, or at least after pick 6 in round one, they've got a really good offensive weapon in Ashton Genty.
For continuing coverage of the Las Vegas Raiders, subscribe to Locked On Raiders wherever you get your podcasts. For more on Ashton Genty, let's hear from Locked On NFL Draft, who spent a lot of time covering Ashton Genty up close.
Ashton Genty is the best running back in the 2025 NFL Draft, which has a loaded running back group. My name is Damian Parson. I am the lead host of the Locked On NFL Draft podcast. What Ashton Genty is going to bring to your team is simple: toughness, grit, physicality, rushing the ball. He has elite contact balance, a compact, dense build with good burst and good top-end speed. But this is a guy that's a 3-down back. He gives full effort as a pass protector, also catches the ball out of the backfield. Didn't catch it a lot in 2024. Go back and look at 2023. He had nearly 600 yards receiving. He has the vision, the patience, the strength to carry a rushing offense. So if your team needs an RB1, a bell cow, a 3-down player, look no further than Ashton Genty. And for more NFL Draft prospects, go subscribe to the Locked On NFL Draft podcast wherever you get your podcast.
The pick is in.
With the 7th pick, the New York Jets select Arman Mimu, offensive tackle out of Missouri. Let's bring in Locked On Jets host John Butchko to talk about that. And John, let me ask you this. Were you surprised that the Jets picked Mimu as the second O-lineman taken off the board?
No, I wasn't. A lot of the buzz heading into this draft was that the Jets really liked Mimu, that he was a guy that was rising up their boards as we got deeper into this process. Most of the buzz was that the Jets were either zeroed in on Mimu or Tyler Warren out of Penn State, the tight end. But I think looking at the situation right now, Jets had 4 of their 5 offensive line slots kind of locked in. You have Olu Fashanu at left tackle, John Simpson left guard, Joe Tippmann at center, and Elijah Vera Tucker at right guard. Right tackle is really the question mark, and it's been that way since the offseason began when they lost Morgan Moses to New England. And entering the day, their projected starter would have been Chukwuma Okorafor, a guy they signed during the offseason, a guy who only played 12 snaps last year with the Patriots before he was benched and then left the team. And the year before that, he was Pittsburgh's starter at right tackle, was benched that year. So I think that, look, you'd like to have a better situation at tight end than Jeremy Ruckert starting, but the bigger need is definitely the offensive line.
Indeed. And to your point, when you look at a player like a Tyler Warren and you kind of look at the depth at tight end in this draft, you can easily get someone that solid unless he's going to be generational, like as we talked about a Brock Bowers this high in the draft. But looking at Mimu, what are the biggest assets for you that he brings to the table, especially in terms of giving Justin Fields the protection that he's going to need in order to thrive, as well as Breece Hall to continue to keep striving and thriving like we've seen him do even last season?
Well, that's a great way of putting it. Justin Fields is a quarterback with a lot of potential, but through his career, one of his issues has been a lack of pocket presence. Sometimes he holds the ball too long. Sometimes he doesn't do a great job maneuvering within the pocket. You want to make sure you have a good offensive line in front of him. And the Jets' offensive line was really solid at pass blocking a year ago. It was kind of one of the untold stories of the year. We know the Jets had a bad season going 5-12 when they had such high expectations, but it was really not the offensive line. It was really the first time in recent memory the Jets had a solid offensive line, but they lost Morgan Moses in the offseason. In Mimu, you get a guy with a lot of upside, a guy who's got the physical tools to play the tackle position effectively, and a guy who succeeded at a very high level of college football at a young age. And, as you mentioned, Breece Hall is a quality back. Breece Hall's a home run hitter, but he's not always great at reading his blocks. And so one of the things you got to make sure you open big holes for Breece Hall, because if he sees daylight, he can rip off a 20, 30-yard run. But you got to put the guys in front of him who can move defenders.
Indeed. And you look at that defense, and the defense is the kind of the bell cow for this New York Jets team. Maybe the offense a little bit unheralded or underwhelming, if you will, because of maybe what we saw last year. Ultimately, however, they may have been a little bit closer, John, than maybe folks give them credit for. So when you look at adding this final piece, as you mentioned, to the O-line for head coach Aaron Glenn and for offensive coordinator Tanner Engstrom, how does that give them the ability to really build out an offense that complements a pretty solid defense?
It's like I mentioned, like the Jets' offensive line woes have gone on for like 15 years since the early Rex Ryan days, when at that point they had one of the best offensive lines in the league, and they stopped investing in it, and the offensive line deteriorated, and it's been difficult to it's been difficult for the offense to operate, because we always focus on the playmakers, we focus on the star receivers, we focus on the running backs to rip off the big runs. But at the end of the day, football is a game where you have to control the trenches, and if you can't control the trenches, your offense can't move. I mean, I could show you any random Jets game probably between 2013 and 2023 where the Jets are getting annihilated on the offensive line, and that's one of the big sources of their problem. So the second straight year, the Jets have drafted a tackle in the first round, and that's a little unconventional, but I think it's a positive, because I think it's showing you that they are committing to building a team that can win in the trenches, and ultimately that's how you win games in this league.
Yeah, and I think they're understanding, as I like to call it, how important the brains of the operation is. I always say the unheralded guys, the offensive line, really do make the engine run. So for continuing coverage of the New York Jets, subscribe to Locked On Jets wherever you get your podcast. And for more on Arman Mimu, let's hear from Locked On Mizzou host John Miller, who spent a lot of time covering Mimu up close.
Missouri's Armand Mimu is an extremely high floor prospect. I'm John Miller with the Locked On Mizzou podcast. And while Mimu is a very good right tackle in the SEC, an excellent one, I would say, I have to say most years I'm not sure he would be the top-ranked tackle in the NFL draft. The arm length is good enough, but not ideal, I would say. So there is some question as to whether Mimu can hold up in pass rush against the absolute elite rushers in the league. However, I think worst-case scenario, he's an excellent run blocker and a really good guard at the next level, worst-case scenario. Again, I'm John Miller with Locked On Mizzou. Check out my show on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts.
The pick is in.
With the number 8 selection, the Carolina Panthers select Tet McMillan, wide receiver from Arizona, presented by LinkedIn. Here to break down this pick with me is Julian Council, the host over at Locked On Panthers. And Julian, Tet McMillan, an intriguing prospect. I know that some people love him, other people not so much. Where are you on Tet McMillan?
Yeah, I'm stunned, honestly, Kevin, that this was the pick for Carolina. I felt like defense is where they were going to go in particular with an edge rusher. Jaylen Walker from Georgia had been mocked to them for well over a month now as the pick. And when that happens, especially when you're sitting at 8, it's different if you're at 1, 2, or 3, where we saw Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, albeit to the Jags, not Browns, and then Abdul Carter go off the board. Like the first 3 picks, like those can be predictable. Once you get down to 8, it could be a wide range of players. And we had seen over the last 24 hours that Walter Nolan from Ole Miss had been mocked there. Mason Graham had been mocked there as well. But Tet McMillan, I had heard that maybe at 5, if Jacksonville had stayed there, he could be going to them because they were going to be aggressive, which certainly they were in getting an offensive playmaker. I did not expect this to be the pick for Carolina. It feels pretty clear to me, just based off of how long it was taking for the pick to be in after all those picks were going pretty rapidly, especially for a night one, that Dan Morgan, the Panthers GM, was trying to trade out of that pick. But clearly, whatever offers they were getting just weren't good enough for them. So they decided that they were going to stay put and they were going to take a player who can help Bryce Young in a pivotal year 3 here, kind of in 2025.
Is this the pick that you would have made for the Panthers, or would you have gone somewhere else?
Well, obviously in a perfect world, I would have traded out of this pick, but we do not live in a perfect world at all. And like based on what was available to Carolina, I probably would have gone with Jaylen Walker from Georgia to be able to have that edge rusher and also that hybrid linebacker type that he's been. But there were question marks of whether he would have fit into this scheme. I saw Mykel Williams win 11th overall. He could have made sense as well, as he's somebody who I think had he been healthy this past season, you can't forget he got a cheap shot week 1 against Clemson. And had he been healthy, maybe he puts up a bigger stat line this past season at Georgia. But I thought Carolina, they probably wanted to trade out. So if I was going to be sitting there knowing that Mason Graham was off the board, I would probably have taken Jaylen Walker at this point in time, but I'm not sitting here like mad at all about this pick. It can make sense when you really think about, I felt like Carolina really needed to add to the receiver position. I know Xavier Legette is expected to be a top tier receiver for them down the road. I haven't seen it just yet, which it's still early. And I think he can be a good player for them, but I never felt like he was going to be a number one. Adam Thielen likely going to either be done in Carolina or retire from the NFL after this season, most likely both. And then you have Jalen Coker, nice player, but can't forget he was undrafted a year ago. The Panthers cut him during roster cutdown day. He played well last year, and he deserves an opportunity to continue to fight for a roster spot, not necessarily fight, but to be in a key role in this offense. But you can never stop trying to make your team better, especially when you're coming off of a 5-12 season. As good as things looked in the second half of the season, still wasn't a good football team, but this is an offense that's heading in the right direction. So why not add another piece there to help out your young quarterback?
There are a lot of strengths that Tet McMillan has that are super intriguing, especially for this Carolina offense. But Julian, I'm sure you have seen the quote that has been circling around Tet McMillan and that has really called his love for football into question. Some people think it's a really big deal. Other people, not so much when it comes to not watching film and, oh, does he love the game or not?
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Well, you're going to have to tell me the quote, because quite honestly, I mean, I had heard some stuff about Tech McMillan that he was lazy and blah. Like, I tune all that stuff out because it's a lot of things that just poison the well in these players and part of the draft process that I truly hate. So I don't know what quote this is. So please educate me on this quote that has people questioning him.
Essentially, it was that in terms of the film, he watches film with his teammates, but, it's coming off as he doesn't really enjoy football. So there's a lot of controversy around it. But to me, teams are even apparently having a list of guys that don't love football. And it's a new list on top of character concerns.
Yeah.
If it's true and, maybe that's not all there for Tet and it's not really his first love, would that concern you?
I don't think that Dave Canales and Dan Morgan are taking a guy who doesn't love the game or that they don't think is going to take it seriously. Like, I mean, it's a job at the end of the day, and not everybody loves their job, but they come to work and they get the job done and they can do pretty well at it. So I'm not saying that's an apples comparison. If he didn't love football and the numbers he put up at Arizona, the numbers he put up, I'm just very curious to see how that's going to translate to the league if he still doesn't love football. But I can't imagine he's not going to apply himself by watching film and get better every day. Like we'll have to wait and see. Like right now, I mean, this is new information to me. Am I concerned about it? Not really. It just seems like the same old draft lead up kind of stuff that just tears down players.
Yeah, drafts have those storylines, and it's unfortunate that they do. And again, what it was is that Tet McMillan watches film with his teammates, but he doesn't actually enjoy watching the game of football. So still a really talented player. Yeah, exactly.
Like he'd rather watch other things when he's at home. Okay.
Exactly.
I mean,
yeah.
I enjoy doing podcasts. I don't like listening to them all the time when I'm at my house.
There you go. See, it all relates back to each other. And again, for continuing coverage of the Carolina Panthers, subscribe to Locked On Panthers wherever you get your podcasts. For more on Tet McMillan, let's hear from Locked On NFL Draft. He spent a lot of time covering Tet McMillan up close.
Tetairoa McMillan is really a wide receiver with no flaws and a lot of really good aspects to him. I'm your host, Mike Luke of Locked On Wildcats, your team every day. Tetairoa McMillan is 6'5" and has the proverbial catch radius that everybody wants. He can go up and he can get the football. He's an incredibly smart football player as well, and his ability to run after the catch is incredibly underrated. Coming in at a legitimate 6'5", also a great guy. This is the kind of player that projects as a number one wide receiver in the NFL. People talk about Mike Evans. I think that's a decent comparison. Both big-bodied, both can go up and get the ball. But either way, worst case scenario, Tetairoa McMillan is going to be an awesome number 2 and quite possibly a very good number 1 for whatever team they get. I'm Mike Luke, host of Locked On Wildcats. Subscribe and follow us and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. Play high-quality Xbox games at a fraction of the cost of a console. Already have a console? A Fire TV Stick 4K device is more affordable and easier to travel with, allowing you to take you or your kids' games wherever you plug in. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K, 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max, 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube, 3rd Gen.
The pick is in.
With the 9th pick, the New Orleans Saints select Kelvin Banks Jr., offensive tackle out of Texas. Let's bring in Locked On New Orleans Saints host Ross Jackson to break that pick down. Ross, for you, was it a surprise that the Saints went with an old lineman at 9?
No, absolutely not. I mean, look, new head coach Kellen Moore is all about building from the inside out. It's been the mantra this entire offseason. General manager Mickey Loomis brought it up again during his pre-draft press conference. He's a Philadelphia Eagles former offensive coordinator, had a great offensive line with Philly, had a phenomenal offensive line with Dallas as well. Now an opportunity to build that offensive line here in New Orleans and get things started with his offense and his system. This was the pick that we, not just the position we expected, but actually the pick that we expected over at Locked On Saints. So this is no surprise at all. This is the mechanism to building a winning team, is to build in the trenches.
Indeed, indeed. And while Banks Jr. is known for his run blocking ability, Ross, there have been some questions about his struggles in pass pro. So does he have enough of a base for you, for offensive line coach, Saints offensive line coach Brendan Nugent, to really kind of work with and develop?
Yeah, I think so for sure. I mean, this is a young guy that's really athletic, maybe not as athletic as some of the other top offensive linemen in this class, but certainly was a player that we knew was going to go a lot higher than maybe the media board suggested and the media mock suggested. And he's somebody that immediately comes in, as you mentioned, polishes a run blocker. That's kind of going to be the game here in New Orleans. The Saints have no resolution at this moment in terms of who their quarterback is. And so if they're going with a young quarterback, expect the Saints to run the ball a lot in 2025. And so having these stud offensive linemen that help them kind of figure things out. I expect Taliesin Fuanga, last year's first round pick, to probably move back to his natural position at right tackle. Potentially here you can see Kelvin Banks Jr. slotting in at left tackle, his natural position where he played 42 games over in Texas. But we'll see which direction they go. The idea here is you get another offensive line, you figure out who your 5 best guys are, and you get them out there. And so he's going to have to make some of that development in the pass game, but he's not as raw as, say, a Trevor Penning was a few years ago back in the 2022 NFL draft when they took him along with wide receiver Chris Olave. So a little bit more to work with, and somebody that has been one of those players that has just gotten better and better and better. And here's the other thing too, durable. Hasn't missed one. He missed one game, and it was just that SEC championship game at the end of the season. That was the first game that he's missed since high school. The New Orleans Saints had a ton of injuries on the offensive line last year. Kelvin Banks will be a very welcome departure from that story.
Yeah, and you think about, Ross, all of the commentary that was around when Kelvin Banks Jr. wasn't able to make that game. It told you just how important he was to that Texas offense indeed. But you threw it out there, so I'm throwing it back at you. The Saints have a lot of holes to fill, including some question marks as to who is going to be under center for them, who's going to be QB1, if you will, when the season starts. Do you feel like that and some of those other holes to fill makes you think that maybe they're not done yet in this round?
I think it's very possible that they're not done yet in this first round. Look, like you said, the biggest question mark is at the most important position, and that's quarterback right now. The Saints have a talented young quarterback in the room already in Spencer Rattler, but he was last year's draft selection. If the New Orleans Saints and new head coach Kellen Moore fall in love with the guy that they like towards the end of the back half of this first round, I would absolutely expect them to be in pursuit of a trade to get back up to go and grab whoever that quarterback might be. A couple of names to watch are going to be Ole Miss quarterback Jackson Dart, as well as Louisville quarterback Tyler Shuck. If one of those guys ends up being available late in this draft, expect the New Orleans Saints to start working the phones, trying to move up from that number 40 overall selection in the second round.
And it's very possible, Ross, because obviously in watching the board so far, there really hasn't been any type of run on QB. So if the New Orleans Saints decide to go in that direction, at least as of now, it is trending favorably for them. Appreciate the time, Ross. For continuing coverage of our New Orleans Saints, subscribe to Locked On Saints wherever you get your podcast. And for more on Kelvin Banks Jr., let's hear from Locked On Longhorns host Jonathan Davis, who spent a lot of time covering Kelvin Banks Jr. up close.
Kelvin Banks is the best left tackle to come out of the University of Texas in almost 3 decades, and he is more than worthy of being your team's first-round pick. What's up, guys and gals? BK Brad Kellner from Locked On Longhorns here with a quick draft profile of Texas left tackle Kelvin Banks. For my money, the best offensive lineman in this class. If you don't believe me, go back to 2022. Banks' freshman season at Texas. The Longhorns were hosting Alabama, and Banks was tasked with blocking then Alabama, now Houston Texans Pro Bowl edge rusher Will Anderson Jr. Banks dominated that matchup in only his second career game. Anderson jumped off sides 3 or 4 times because he got so frustrated that he couldn't beat Banks. Banks won the Lombardi Award, the Outland Trophy, and was a first-team All-America last season with good reason. If you're looking for your team's answer at left tackle for the next decade, look no further than Kelvin Banks. For more on the Longhorns, subscribe to Locked On Longhorns on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
The pick is in.
With the number 10 overall pick, the Chicago Bears select Colston Loveland, tight end from Michigan. And this is presented by LinkedIn. Here to talk about this with me is from Locked On Bears, Lauren Cox. Lauren, the Bears, they were a spot. Maybe they could trade up for Ashton Genty. Maybe Tyler Warren would be the first tight end off the board. It is Colston Loveland to Chicago. How are you feeling about the pick?
Yeah, I think Chicago was in a tricky spot at 10, and we knew they would be, where all of the different blue chip elite prospects were all off the board. So now you're kind of trying to take the best of the rest. And clearly Ben Johnson believes that Colston Loveland is going to be that guy. They see him like the Chicago's version of Sam Laporta or TJ Hawkinson that can open up the play action passing game a bit more for Caleb Williams, be a nice compliment for Cole Kmet, and feeling like, yeah, well, kind of just the best option out of the next tier of players that there wasn't anybody that you love. There was no like obvious player that, oh, the Bears should have taken this guy instead. So you can be happy with a weapon like Loveland for Caleb Williams.
And I think now you have a situation where we know last offseason, Lauren, the Bears tried to build out that offense around Caleb Williams, getting him weapons, signing Keenan Allen, and making sure that DeAndre Swift was in the fold. But Colston Loveland is a player. What are some of the strengths and weaknesses you see for him as he enters the NFL?
Yeah, he's got a physical skill set that you don't see in a lot of tight ends. This sort of next generation of guys who are both big and really fast. We didn't get a combine performance. I mean, we don't have a 40-yard dash because he's recovering from shoulder surgery, but I have a feeling he would have lit up the combine had we been able to see it, because this is a guy that you see, pull away and separate in man coverage, not just a tight end who finds a hole in his zone and sits there, but can run away from linebackers and even slower safeties in the NFL. He's going to get open and then make plays after the catch with the ball in his hands. And I think they see enough upside in him as a blocker. That's not his strength by any means, but it's not terrible. He's not the world's worst blocker either, that he can be an all-around threat in this offense that they see as a 700-800 yard receiving type tight end that's in that upper echelon of players and you need him to be worth the 10th overall pick.
Still a lot of work to be done with Chicago in the draft, still draft capital to work with. Lauren, where do the Bears go from here now that Colston Loveland's a member of the team?
Yeah, they've got 2 picks early in the second round and then a 3rd round pick as well. That I think that's where Bears fans want to see them get back to rebuilding the trenches. I think that was sort of the hope for 10, but none of the offensive linemen were there. None of the defensive linemen were quite the best player available on the board, but they should have some good options to keep investing in those units up front to bolster the both sides of the ball for Chicago, and maybe get another playmaking running back in there too. If you got the time, there should be some good depth in that range.
For continuing coverage of the Chicago Bears, subscribe to Locked On Bears wherever you get your podcasts. And for more on Colston Loveland, let's hear from Locked On Wolverines, who spent a lot of time covering Colston Loveland up close.
If you really want to enhance your passing game, the guy that you need is Colston Loveland. Yes, he is a tight end, but guess what? He plays like that tall wide receiver of your dreams. This is Isaiah Hole, host of the Locked On Wolverines podcast, and I've watched Colston Loveland, who's exited Michigan after 3 years, coming out of Gooding, Idaho. He was Michigan's pass game. The whole receiving of that Michigan had all of last year, pretty much courtesy of Colston Loveland, who bailed out the no quarterback situation in Ann Arbor, right? He is a guy that can absolutely stretch the field for you. He can snag the ball. He's got that uncanny ability to track the football, and he's a touchdown machine. He can get the contested ball, and guess what? He can also run block. He can do a little bit of everything. While others are going to be looking at Tyler Warren from Penn State, Colston Loveland went into the season being thought of as the top tight end in all of college football for a reason. And whatever NFL team gets him, they're just going to absolutely love him. Find out more at Locked On Wolverines podcast, wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe to us today.
The pick is in.
11th pick, the San Francisco 49ers select Mykel Williams, the edge out of the University of Georgia. Let's bring in Locked On San Francisco 49ers host Brian Peacock to break this pick down. And Brian, a lot of party noise we heard as we were getting ready to talk Mykel. So I take it 49ers Nation is pleased with this pick from GM John Lynch?
I mean, the party's going to go on, and it might go just all the way through Friday until day 2 starts, because the fans are excited. I'm excited. I hit on my mock draft selection, and it was Mykel Williams, defensive end out of Georgia. He's got such a high floor. He's got such a high ceiling. He's checked so many boxes in a draft where it's hard to find prospects that check a lot of boxes, and Mykel Williams does. He's got height, weight, speed, 6'5", 270. He's a prototype defensive end that can stop the run, and it's important for the 49ers to have that player, because you can't it doesn't matter how good of a pass rush you are if you don't get to 3rd and 8 in the first place. And Mykel Williams can help you get there, and then he can get to the quarterback when it does 3rd and 8.
And GM John Lynch has indeed been one of the GMs who's hit more often than missed in these drafts. And so when you look at him, and we kind of talked about this offline as well, there are some opportunities for misses even in this first round in this 2025 draft. But him at 11, you being the first to mock him at 11, why were you so confident that not only would he land there, but that this indeed was a good pick for Lynch and this franchise overall?
I haven't seen every mock draft, so I'm not sure if I'm first, but I did a really good job.
I'm calling it, Brian. You're first. Go.
I believe I was, and I did a really good job a few weeks ago talking my Locked On 49ers listeners into Mykel Williams, and some of them pushed back a little bit. Like, wait, I'm seeing him in the teens. I'm seeing him in the 20s as a mock draft, and he's a little bit of a slow burn. The first time I passed through on the film, I said, okay, he's a first-round guy. He's a beast. He's a 5-star and all that. I get it. He's big. And then I watched again, and he's sound, and he's willing to do what his assignment calls for. And he's powerful, and he's athletic, and he's got burst off the line. He's got burst to close. And I just think there's so much more for a guy who's only 20 years old. And in this draft, there's a lot of pitfalls, and he checks the boxes, man. So he's a safe pick, and he has a considerable upside on top of it.
And I got to tell you, Brian, just in covering him these last couple of seasons here in Atlanta, just obviously him being in Athens, he's scary good. In fact, we used to have a moment on our shows, our Locked On Bulldogs and our post-game shows called the Mykel moment, because there were just freakish things that Mykel Williams could do and did do that you just couldn't believe it. And so, yeah, we had a Mykel moment. And I tell you, I do understand what the fans are saying, maybe some concerns that you had, especially if maybe you were being introduced to him in 2024, but the guy gutted it out. I mean, he had a grade 2 left ankle sprain during most of that season that he sustained in that Clemson game. He never really was 100%, and yet was still looking better than most that were on the floor. And you talked about it. It's because he's got a high floor. He's got a high ceiling. That's very, very rare. Tell me a little bit more about that. What does that mean to you when you see Mykel and you say high floor and high ceiling? Yeah,
and I think when you get to the NFL level, you talk about upside, and I think people get so enamored with a combine, and they look at speed and they look at what a player could be. But ultimately, upside is Are you willing to do the dirty work? Are you willing to put the work in? Character from the neck up is as much upside as what the 40 time tells you a guy is. And for 49ers fans, and man, I got to be honest, I was thinking back to another 20-year-old prospect that the 49ers drafted over a decade ago in Aldon Smith, who had condor wingspan and was a power player. And he was raw as rain in college as a 20-year-old and came to the 49ers and developed. And you win more with power in the NFL than you do with speed. You don't just get clean wins in the NFL, whether it's as an edge rusher or a running back. You have to be able to run through arm tackles. And so even as a receiver, you don't just get clean. You don't just get to be fast in the NFL and win. You have to have a complete skill set. And that's what I see in Mykel Williams. And so I'm excited about what he could be for the 49ers. And I think across the board, they got themselves someone that they can win with long-term. It's really important to get a guy across from Nick Bosa that can either chase sacks to Bosa or Bosa can chase sacks into him. And with that wingspan, he can catch a lot of sacks.
Yeah, and he's a young guy, 20 years old, a whole lot of potential ahead of him. Appreciate the time, Brian. For continuing coverage of the San Francisco 49ers, subscribe to Locked On Niners wherever you get your podcast. And for more on Mykel Williams, of course, let's hear from Locked On Bulldogs host Daniel Monroe, who spent a lot of time covering Mykel up close.
Mykel Williams is going to be the absolute steal of this NFL draft. Daniel Monroe from Locked On Bulldogs here to tell you why this is a former projected number 1 overall pick, a guy, Mykel Williams, tons of talent, tons of upside. If your team just drafted him, I promise you got him lower than you would have because of some injuries that he sustained last year. It's not that he had an unproductive year or that his performance fell off. It's that he was injured for several games. It hurt his draft stock. There's no long-term injury fears. And so all you're getting is a guy who can absolutely come off the edge with a vengeance, rush the passer, stand up against the run, set an edge if he needs to in a defensive scheme. He can play with his hand on the ground. He can play with his hand off the ground. He's versatile. He can do a ton of things for you. And he's going to be another dynamic playmaker pass rusher on the defensive line coming out of Georgia. If you just drafted Mykel Williams, your team got a good one.
The pick is in.
With the number 12 pick, the Dallas Cowboys select Tyler Booker, guard from Alabama, presented by LinkedIn. Here to break this all down with me is Landon McCool, one of the hosts over at Locked On Cowboys. And Landon, felt like Matthew Golden was that pick that was getting telegraphed for weeks and weeks. They go with Tyler Booker, who is an incredible player, didn't have the best combine, which I know in a lot of circles led to a lot of debates on where he actually would go. Dallas, second year. First, it was Tyler Guyton last year. Later, Tyler Booker goes earlier. What are your overall thoughts as this pick went down?
Oh, we're collecting Tylers. We also have Tyler Beebe as our center, and we had Tyler Biotish, who ended up going to the Commanders just last year, the free agency. So, yeah, I mean, I think that the Cowboys have made a conscious effort to kind of change the culture and change the scheme a little bit in Dallas. The culture being they're looking for even more football-loving guys, good culture guys, and then the scheme being more of a gap man power run game scheme. And Tyler Booker fits both of those two changes to a T. I think he's a guy who can come in right away. I've really changed my philosophy about offensive linemen these last few years, and I think Tyler Smith was part of that change, is that I want to see guys who come into the NFL ready to made with strength. I'm really tired of seeing like the athletic offensive linemen who come in and they just never have time to get any stronger. That is not a problem with Tyler Booker. He's going to be able to come in and move bodies right away. And I think that's what the Cowboys were looking for.
Now, when you talk about his fit in this scheme with this offensive line, obviously Dallas lost Zach Martin to retirement this offseason. You're going to have, that's big shoes to fill,
Absolutely.
Who steps into that. And Tyler Booker, certainly the pedigree of playing in Alabama, having a ton of reps against really good defensive linemen and playing in a tough NFC East division now that has Philadelphia's D-line, which just has monsters up and down. And obviously the Giants and Commanders also have something to say too. How do you like him in Dallas's system and scheme, especially with Brian Schottenheimer at the helm here for year one?
Yeah, I think he's a great fit. I mean, I think we're going to see him, down blocking on guys a lot. We're going to see him pulling out in space and running into the gaps to clear guys out. And I think the other thing, you mentioned it, right? Like they have to play 6 games each year against the NFC East and with Dexter Lawrence, with the Giants, obviously all the guys that Philly has, Newton with the Commanders. There is a healthy rotation of very good defensive tackles in the NFC East. So, securing the front of that pocket with the Tylers, man, I just realized that all with the Tylers in the middle, it really helps. When you have like a veteran quarterback who wants to step up into a pocket like Dak does, especially when he's throwing those seam balls, he wants to have a clean pocket, and so I think it's really important in pass pro to have those guys keeping him clean up front. And then also, I think it's really important for Dak as well to have a solid run game, to build a play action pass game. I think you're going to be able to run the ball a lot more effectively with guys who can move humans inside to get them out of the way for the running back.
I guess we can do some advanced scouting for Dallas for 2026. Tyler, offensive lineman. We know that's where they're going in round 1. Right. Tyler Booker, again, really solid player, but the Cowboys are not done. They have more draft capital to work with. Where do you think they go now that Tyler Booker's on the board?
Well, I think wide receiver was rightfully a position that was penciled in with a lot of these mock drafts going up into the draft. So I do think that wide receiver is still obviously in play, but I think the fit's got to be right. I think I haven't checked to see where we are with who's available, but I know that they probably like Ibuka if he's still available. He's probably picked by now. Golden was another guy that obviously they liked. Who we'll see how far he falls. But even a guy like Jaylen Noel, who I think he just go in there and be that kind of second wide receiver that they need. Really, they just need somebody to kind of draw attention away from CeeDee Lamb in the passing attack. And now with Tyler Booker, hopefully you have a little bit more advanced running game that can also help kind of just draw some of the attention away from CeeDee Lamb and help improve the offense.
For continuing coverage of the Dallas Cowboys, you can subscribe to Locked On Cowboys wherever you get your podcasts. And for more on Tyler Booker, let's hear from Locked On Bama, who spent a lot of time covering Tyler Booker up close.
Offensive lineman Tyler Booker is destined to be a team captain in the National Football League. I'm Luke Robinson with Locked On Bama. Tyler Booker is a fantastic prospect. I think he's got a long NFL career ahead of him. He's been playing in the best conference in the country, blocking some incredible players and also blocking some incredible players in practice. Long arms, great at pass blocking. Kalen DeBoer, his new coach at Alabama, said he's one of the best leaders he's ever been around. He was unquestionably one of the leaders of the 2025 team as well. And when things got a little rocky, especially towards the Iron Bowl after the Oklahoma loss, which was quite embarrassing for the university, Tyler Booker is one of the ones that took it upon himself to make sure everybody was on the same page and they were able to go on and win that big Iron Bowl. Tune in for more coverage from Locked On Bama.
Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
The pick is in.
With the number 13 pick, the Miami Dolphins select Kenneth Grant, defensive lineman from Michigan. Presented by LinkedIn. Here to talk about this with me is Kyle Krabs, the host over at Locked On Dolphins. Kyle, appreciate you taking the time. Kenneth Grant was a popular name in mock drafts, a lot of differing opinions on where he was actually going to go, and a run on defensive lineman. Miami takes part in that with Kenneth Grant. How do you like the fit, and how do you like him in Miami's defense?
Yeah, I think this is a great opportunity for the Dolphins to kind of take advantage of a big body defender that has some pretty rare athletic potential at his disposal, but the run defending profile is a pretty high floor player, and the Dolphins really had a glaring vacancy opposite Zach Sealer on that defensive interior with Christian Wilkins leaving the year prior in free agency, and then they replaced him with Calais Campbell in a snap rotation. It's a kind of an intersection of need. He was one of my 3 best available players for the Dolphins at that spot, and obviously leaning into the trenches. This is a team that last couple of years they've gotten punched in the mouth up front on both sides of the ball, and you like adding a 330, 340-pound anchor in the middle that can kind of help you change that a little bit.
Were there any other players that you were eyeing at 13, or was Kenneth Grant a guy that you had kind of focused in on and you were thrilled with the pick when it happened?
I was kind of expecting the pick to be Jahdae Barron, the defensive back from Texas, with the Dolphins reportedly in the market of moving on from Jalen Ramsey and seeking a trade partner there. They have a need at corner, but the Dolphins brass talked in their press conference after the pick that it's kind of about the tonality of the team. And, you look at some of the names that they've added, whether it's at the skill groups or with James Daniels in free agency at offensive guard, they've been looking for more physical football players. And if that's kind of the theme and the focus, it's hard to argue with Kenneth Grant from a physicality perspective, even though they do have that need at corner. This team just kind of needs to get better in the middle. And because of that, I think it's a great add at this stage of the draft.
How do you think the board has fallen for Miami thus far, with the first round being over? Obviously, Miami going to try to improve some other areas of their roster. Do you think it fell favorably for them, or do you think that there was some picks that you were kind of eyeing for Miami in that first round if they had fallen a little further?
Yeah, I think that the place where the Dolphins may be holding their breath at this stage is on the offensive line, where looking to upgrade that other offensive guard spot opposite James Daniels. You saw a big run on offensive linemen go, and Donovan Jackson being a name that goes to Minnesota in the last couple of picks of the round. And then you get Josh Connerly and Josh Simmons in the last 4 picks of the first round. It's kind of set the stage for that well to dry up pretty fast for guys you feel like can be immediate starters for you. So I think that's the area for Miami that if they're kind of holding their breath trying to get a starter, that will be a little dicey because they don't pick till 48. But you didn't really see a run on corners. We saw 3 corners go in the first round. So I'm sure they're pretty excited about what is still going to be there for them at defensive back if that's the direction they choose to go.
For continuing coverage of the Miami Dolphins, subscribe to Locked On Dolphins wherever you get your podcasts. And for more on Kenneth Grant, let's hear from Locked On Wolverines, who spent a lot of time covering Kenneth Grant up close.
Have you ever seen a 330-pound defensive tackle run down a running back that's got all the speed and everything that you want from a running back? Well, guess what? Michigan's Kenneth Grant did exactly that in 2023 when he went and ran down Katron Allen in the Penn State game. I mean, this guy has got everything you want. I'm Isaiah Holt, host of Locked On Wolverines podcast. Let me tell you what, Kenneth Grant is everything you're looking for in a defensive tackle. He's got speed, power, and size. He is an absolute unit when it comes to the position. Being in Wink Martindale's defense, you can see that the ability to play both the run and the pass. He is just capable at just about anything you put in front of him. He is an absolute game changer. Whatever NFL team gets him, they're just going to absolutely love what he brings to the table. So this is Isaiah Holt from Locked On Wolverines podcast. You can check us out on Locked On Wolverines, wherever you get your podcasts.
The pick is in.
With the number 14 pick, the Indianapolis Colts select Tyler Warren, tight end out of Penn State, presented by LinkedIn. Here to break this all down with me is Zach Hicks, one of the hosts over at Locked On Colts. Now, Zach, this pick, a lot of people predicted it before the draft began. It now becomes a reality. Now that it is the reality, how do you feel about it?
I think we're feeling pretty good out here in Colts Nation. I mean, this was the guy most commonly mocked to the Colts all offseason, the player that was kind of pegged to be the perfect combination of best player available and need for the Colts. And yeah, it's just a really good fit in this Colts offense. I mean, he's a versatile player. He can block, he can catch the ball, he can create after the catch. The Colts have not had a receiving threat at tight end in a long time. I think somebody put the stat out there. They haven't had a 500-yard plus tight end since 2018. Tyler Warren over 1,000 yards last year. So I think everyone out here in Indy is pretty pumped about this pick, or at least most people are pretty pumped about this pick for the Colts.
Now, what does he bring to this Colts offense? Some of the strengths that you've seen while breaking him down. How does he fit into what the Colts want to do here with Anthony Richardson moving forward?
Yeah, I think the Colts' biggest issue on offense is the ability to obviously hit the checkdowns, which I know Tyler Warren can't really do too much in that regard. I mean, he can throw the ball a little bit, but he can't throw the ball to himself here. But it's hit the check down and then create after getting that check down. The Colts had an explosive downfield offense last season when they were able to connect with Alec Pierce, and Josh Downs was a good separator over the middle, but they kind of lack that ability to create after the catch and make those extra yards count. You look at Tyler Warren, over 30 missed tackles forced last season after the catch. I think it was 6.6 yards after catch last year as well per reception. A guy who just excels at getting the ball in his hands, becoming that runner with the ball in his hands, running over defenders, using that size to his advantage. And then you also I think he's a really good run blocker as well. He's not this pure inline threat tight end, but he's a pure weapon in the run game. You can line him up as a sniffer tight end. You can put him at fullback. You can put him out wide, and you're going to get a physical threat out there. So you add an enforcer to this offense. You add a guy who can run block, and you also add a guy who can create after the catch for an offense that lacked that ability last year. I just think those traits alone kind of give the Colts what they wanted last year in Brock Bowers. They kind of get it now in Tyler Warren.
There's still more work to be done for the Colts. Obviously, Tyler Warren is a piece to their puzzle, but where else do you think the Colts are looking as the draft moves on?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is certainly offensive line. They need a right guard going forward and on day 2 of the draft. And luckily, they didn't have to move up to get Tyler Warren like some of us were speculating here in Indy that they would have to go up and get him. So they still have both those day 2 picks available. So they can go get one of those guards on day 2, plenty of options that are likely going to be there. And then maybe bolster the defensive front as well. They have just one defensive end under contract past 2025. Their defensive tackles are both going into their age 31 season. They need a little bit more depth on that interior of the defensive line. So I think they can address the trenches here on day 2.
And for continuing coverage of the Indianapolis Colts, subscribe to Locked On Colts wherever you get your podcast. For more on Tyler Warren, let's hear from Locked On Nittany Lions, who spent a lot of time covering Tyler Warren up close.
If you want that elite, all-pro caliber tight end in your offense, you take Penn State's Tyler Warren. My name is Zach Sako, and I'm the host of Locked On Nittany Lions. Tyler Warren is the complete player. He literally can do it all. In Penn State's offense, he was catching passes. He was running the football. He was taking snaps at quarterback. He was making the snaps. He would snap the football at center and go run a route after that, and even scored a touchdown on that play. You can line up Tyler Warren anywhere on the football field, and he will be productive. He can take over games. That is what you are getting in Tyler Warren if you are an NFL franchise. This guy can be the focal point in your offense. He can complement what your system does well. Either way, you are going to get somebody that puts the team first, checks off every single box, and can do it all as a complete tight end. Blocking, catching, anything that you ask him to, Tyler Warren will do it, and he is worth a top 10 pick in this year's NFL draft. For more coverage around Penn State football and other Penn State sports, subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.
The pick is in.
With the 15th pick, the Atlanta Falcons select Jaylen Walker, linebacker, Georgia. Let's bring in Locked On Atlanta Falcons host Aaron Freeman. So first of all, Free, I got to give you so much credit because the inside joke is you kept on your pink shirt because that's what we wore on our show earlier today because we wanted the Falcons to come in hot. They did what you asked them to do. Your mantra has been the free guarantee on your Locked On Falcons show, our Atlanta Football Party shows. How satisfying is it for you, first of all, to have your guarantee of a defensive player actually come to fruition?
I was a little nervous, T, in the lead up to the pick because I'm like, it's right there. Jaylen Walker, when Carolina passed on him, the second most popular destination for him besides 8 to the Panthers was 15 to the Falcons. And it was like, okay, this seems to be the way it goes, but the Falcons will always throw you a curveball and zig when you expect them to zag. And so I was a little nervous. And then when the pick came in and it was Jaylen Walker, I'm like, okay, yep, makes total sense. The Falcons get a versatile player, right? That's the thing with Jaylen Walker, right? If you love the versatility, you say he's a hybrid. If you don't love the versatility, you call him a tweener. But a guy that played both linebacker and defensive end or outside linebacker, edge rusher, whatever you want to call it, for the Georgia Bulldogs this past year, has that versatility for the Atlanta Falcons. But I think given their obvious need to enhance their pass rush, they're going to ask him to go forward as an edge rusher immediately. And he has the tools and talent to help them immediately in that role.
Yeah, because he's officially listed as a linebacker. Obviously, the Falcons depth chart is right with linebackers, but what's that one thing that kind of stands out for you when you look at Jeff Ulbrich, some of the comments that he's made as defensive coordinator for this Falcons team and how he wants to really delve into and really kind of lean into that variety and multiples? What do you think is that biggest thing that Jaylen Walker brings for this Jeff Ulbrich defense?
Yeah, when you talk about multiple defenses, it's that hybrid defense. Sometimes we're 3-4, sometimes we're 4-3, and so Jaylen Walker has the ability to be able to be moved around the formation. And I think especially really what Jaylen Walker allows you to do is to be a more aggressive defense, that he's not necessarily at this stage in his career a guy that you can just ask to put his hand in the dirt and go get the quarterback. I think with him and Leonard Floyd and Arnold Ebiketie and Caden Ellis and all these guys that the Falcons have up front, there's not a single one of these guys, at least at this stage in their careers, that you can say that's a guy that I definitely know is going to be able to get the quarterback on the ground. Now, obviously, with the Falcons selecting Jaylen Walker this high, they expect him to grow into that player. But I think what the Falcons are looking to do is to be that more aggressive defense, as we saw in that 5-week span after their bye week when they were, I think, second or third in the NFL in sacks after spending the entire previous part of the season being dead last in sacks. And what they did during that span of games was they unleashed Caden Ellis, they unleashed Arnold Ebiketie, and I think Jaylen Walker and now Leonard Floyd have that ability to sort of the Falcons with their simulated pressures, their blitzes and whatnot, and putting 5, 6, 7 guys on the line of scrimmage and offenses not knowing where these guys are coming from, who's going to come. Jaylen Walker fits into that sort of identity on defense. And that sort of, I think, is what is going to define this Jeff Ulbrich scheme with Jaylen Walker on the team.
Yeah, as good as Jaylen Walker is, Aaron, some may say it's a bold pick. And we can explain what we mean by bold, because with this Falcons organization, particularly in the Terry Fontenot scheme, it has been 4 straight offensive players in the first round. So to get a defensive player in the first round is a bold move for this Falcons organization under the Terry Fontenot era, right? And also to get a UGA player in the first round is an absolutely bold move from what we've seen from Terry Fontenot. Do you believe, Aaron, that this is kind of reading the tea leaves, that we're going to see some more bold, sort of uncharacteristically bold moves from Fontenot?
It's going to be interesting to see how the rest of the draft goes, with this being sort of the first selection. As you said, this is the first, I believe, Georgia player they've taken in the first round. This is the first Georgia player they've taken in the top 100 since 2011 when they took Akeem Dent in the 3rd round in that Julio Jones draft. This is, this is one of those things where we sat here all offseason saying, if they don't get a Georgia player early in this year's draft, given how some of the top Georgia players lined up perfectly with their needs, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, like, it's never going to happen for this football team. And as you said, getting that defensive player after years and years of investing on the offensive side of the ball, and you saw that offense look like it was on a bright trajectory at the end of the season with Michael Penix. And it's like, hey, you got enough pieces on that side of the ball. You need some help for this defense that desperately needs it. That was, bottom 5 throughout most of last season and was dead last for most of last season in terms of pass rush. So I think Jaylen Walker really shows that the Falcons are not, going to putt around and make and try to be cute with their draft selection. And we talked all offseason about how this is going to be a defensive heavy draft, and at least one pick in, so far so good. With the rest of the picks, because as I said, the Falcons are known to throw a curveball at you, but it does seem like they're heading in that direction for that defensive heavy focus.
I'm so glad that you and I didn't have to start our conversation this year with the Falcons gonna Falcon, because they didn't. Falcon, appreciate the time free. For continuing coverage of the Falcons, subscribe to Locked On Falcons wherever you get your podcast. And for more on Jaylen Walker, let's hear from Locked On Bulldogs host Clint Shamblin, who spent a lot of time covering Walker up close.
Clint Shamblin, Locked On Bulldogs here, talking Jaylen Walker and why he is going to be your team's favorite draft pick. It's this and this reason alone. He's the best linebacker in the draft, period. That's all you need to know. This cat is the real deal. He came under Kirby Smart, Glenn Schumann, really accelerated under athleticism, point of attack, pass rushing, as well as sideline to sideline eraser. Nakobe Dean, Roquan Smith, Channing Tindall, all of them are there. And this is just the next succession of great linebackers at Georgia. If you are a linebacker in America that wants to get drafted onto a playoff team, you come to Georgia. That's where you go. If your team needs a linebacker, you head down to Kirby Smart because the products are ready to go. And Jaylen Walker, Butkus award-winning linebacker, he not only can play with his hand off the ground, he can get into a stance and get off the edge. He's a disruptor. He's incredible. Your team is lucky to be getting him. Jaylen Walker, great draft selection. Speed, athleticism, smarts, and tenacity all rolled into one.
The pick is in.
With the number 16 pick, the Arizona Cardinals select Walter Nolan, defensive lineman from Ole Miss, presented by LinkedIn. Here to talk about it with me, it's Alex Clancy, the host over at Locked On Cardinals. And Alex, felt like the Cardinals going to go on in a bunch of different directions with this pick. They decided to go with Walter Nolan, a very deep defensive line class. Walter Nolan got a lot of buzz, especially over the last few days before the draft began. How are you feeling about the pick?
You feel solid. I mean, the Cardinals had a couple of needs. Any one that they would have chosen, you got to be happy with. And they're making an off-season weakness into a bona fide strength going into 2025, and you can't be mad at it.
Not at all. And now you have Arizona adding a very talented player to that defense. What does Walter Nolan bring to that defense? What are some strengths that intrigue you about him in this defense, and how can he help be an immediate impact player?
He brings some twitch. You know, you've got Dalvin Tomlinson as a run stuffer. You've got Calais Campbell who's done everything for 15 plus years. You got Darius Robinson who's kind of TBD still after being out for the majority of his rookie season. You've got Dante Stills, a former 6th-round pick who's kind of led the charge in the interior defensive line, and that kind of tells you the state of the defensive line for the Arizona Cardinals over the last couple seasons. So he brings some youth burst in the interior to be able to collapse the pocket, allow the edge to do their job, and all in all, if the dude can keep his head on straight, and I think he'll have no problem doing with the ecosystem Jonathan Gannon and Nick Rallis on the defense have instilled since coming over at the end of the 2022 season, he's going to be in a really, really good spot to learn, grow, and hopefully pop.
Was this the pick you would have made if you were Arizona? Does this make sense to you, or was there another player or two that you liked over Walter Nolan?
So I'll take the latter first. Does it make sense? Yes. Was it the person I would have taken? No. I'm a huge offensive line guy. If you don't protect Kyler Murray, if you don't protect the quarterback, none of it's going to work. I would have gone corner second with Johnny Barron and Will Johnson just falling into their lap at 16 to shore up the secondary. But if you add some beef and some youth, I don't know how you can be mad at it. So I'm not, screaming from the mountaintops like I did when Steve Keim traded for Hollywood Brown with a first-round pick that turned into an all-world center and drafted a tight end in the second round a couple years ago. This is a far cry from that.
And for continuing coverage of the Arizona Cardinals, subscribe to Locked On Cardinals wherever you get your podcasts. And for more on Walter Nolan, let's hear from Locked On SEC, who spent a lot of time covering Walter Nolan up close.
Walter Nolan could be the next Aaron Donald. What's up, everybody? Chris Gordy here from Locked On SEC. And any team that drafts Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss is getting an absolute stud. A guy who was just scratching the surface on what he could be in college. Spent 2 seasons at Texas A&M before spending last season at Ole Miss in Oxford. 4 sacks and 23 with the Aggies. Up that to 6.5 last season with Ole Miss. He's big. He's strong. He's physical. He's compared himself to Aaron Donald. Now, Donald had 4 years at Pitt before coming out. Nolan coming out just 3 years of college. But at 21 years old, he'll plug in immediately on the interior of a team's defensive line, and coaches are going to love his physicality. To me, the sky is the limit for Walter Nolan at the next level. Don't be surprised if he ends up being a finalist for Defensive Rookie of the Year following next season. For more on the SEC, remember to subscribe to Locked On SEC wherever you get your podcasts.
Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. Play high-quality Xbox games at a fraction of the cost of a console. Already have a console? A Fire TV Stick 4K device is more affordable and easier to travel with, allowing you to take you or your kids' games wherever you plug in. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K, 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max, 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube, 3rd Gen.
The pick is in.
With the 17th pick, the Cincinnati Bengals select Shamar Stewart, edge, Texas A&M. Let's bring in Locked On Cincinnati Bengals host, Jake Lisco. Jake, was this the pick you expected at 17 and was the right one for the Bengals?
It was the pick that I expected today. It's not the pick that I expected yesterday. It's not the pick that I expected when the Arizona Cardinals were on the clock. But as soon as the Arizona Cardinals selected Walter Nolan, I thought that Shamar Stewart was next in line for the Cincinnati Bengals. I hoped for a Derek Harmon here. That was probably the favorite for me at that point in time, but I did expect that the Bengals would really like Shamar Stewart, and they did, and they took that bet.
Yeah, and for you, you think about Stewart and the fact that he recorded just 11 TFLs, 4.5 sacks in 3 seasons at A&M, but some still say his tape is better than his production. So how much do you buy into those thoughts about Shamar Stewart's upside?
I think there is upside. I think that he didn't complete his athletic testing. And if we would have seen him do those agility drills and had a real understanding of what his athleticism was, it would be a much clearer picture to say, yeah, you can bet on those athletic traits. Those guys that are true 1 of 1 or 1% of 1% athletes, and talking about NFL level athletes in the first place, those guys you can bet on traits. But the Bengals have recently bet on a traits guy in Myles Murphy, and that was 10 plus picks later in the draft at the end of the first round. And they're still waiting to see if Myles Murphy is going to come around. And so when we see players that have this kind of production profile coming out of college, and you also see the skip in agility testing, yeah, the straight line athleticism is great. The 40 is awesome. The 10-yard split is awesome. The jumps were awesome. The hurries, he's leads Texas A&M in pressures, but then the finishing isn't there. The missed tackles racked up for Shamar Stewart. And that's also true of Derek Harmon. So that's the guy that I wanted, another tackling issue. But the Bengals are counting on the fact that they're going to be able to get him to be a better finisher than he was in college. And there was a long track record for Stewart in college of not being able to finish those plays. There was a big step up in run defense, at least in his final year at A&M, but it is a bet. And so there's obviously a chance that he hits that upside. I hope he does for the sake of the Bengals. I think that would be a necessary piece for their defense. When you're taking a defensive player at 17, you hope he can be a cornerstone for you. Yeah. And we'll see if that bet pays out.
And I was thinking about that too, Jake, because this is one of those quirky divisions where it's very difficult for a team to think about how they're going to get out of the division. When we look at last year, for example, it seemed like it was going to be the Steelers until it wasn't. Then it was obviously the Ravens, but the Bengals were right there, and we just kind of never know what the Browns are going to be. But that said, Shamar Stewart's going to have to face Lamar Jackson and then whomever the Steelers and Browns put on the field under center multiple times this coming season. How much does Stewart help the Bengals to move the needle for their ability to contain Jackson and also to really get back to the top of the division?
They hope that it gives them some help to be a contain edge. They hope that his size plays up. They hope that the run defense improvements that he showed in his most recent year at A&M can translate to the NFL and continue to trend in that direction. He's still a young player. There's still room for development there. And obviously, like I said, the straight line traits and the strength are there for Stewart. It's a matter of developing his football sense, his understanding of what teams are trying to do to him, and his ability to find the ball on the field. And on top of that, find ways to finish plays. And part of that is being able to anticipate what's coming. And the game needs to slow down for him a little bit, I think. But with all those traits, that's clearly what the team is banking on here. Again, not a pick that I would have probably made personally, but I'm not in the Bengals front office, obviously. And so we'll hope that the traits work out, looking at it from the outside, looking in for the Bengals, and that those production questions don't persist into the NFL.
Indeed. Appreciate the time, Jake, and for continuing coverage of the Bengals. Subscribe to Locked On Bengals wherever you get your podcasts.
The pick is in.
With the number 18 pick, the Seattle Seahawks select Gray Zabel, offensive lineman, North Dakota State, presented by LinkedIn. Here to break down this pick with me, it is Corbin Smith, the host over at Locked On Seahawks. And Corbin, I know there were a lot of conversations about where Seattle could go with this pick. They end up going with Gray Zabel. How are you feeling about it?
This was a guy that was on my short list. The Seahawks badly needed offensive line help. They didn't want to force the issue making that selection with pick number 18. But Clint Kubiak's offense is going to be requiring athletic blockers that can get out in space, get on the move, win the position battle. Gray Zabel can do all of those things. One of the most athletic linemen in this class, 36.5-inch vertical, 4.6 second short shuttle. So he's got quickness, he's got explosiveness, and he's played all 5 offensive line spots. That versatility is rare, even for an FCS prospect. Shine to the Senior Bowl. This is a really good value pick, even with an FCS player, because that gap has closed clearly. We're seeing more of these FCS guys make it to the NFL ranks and get picked early by year, it feels like.
Was there anybody else that you felt like could have been a fit for this pick, or do you think that the board fell the way that it did and Gray Zabel was the guy they were going with all the way?
I think there were definitely some other names that were in consideration. Will Johnson, the corner from Michigan, was still there. Donovan Ezraku, who is yet to be picked as of the time of this recording, another player that the Seahawks could have went with off the edge. There were a few receivers. Matthew Golden went to the Packers. That's why the Seahawks were trying to trade down. They were actively trying to move down because they had a number of players they were interested in, but other teams felt the same way, so they couldn't strike that deal. Gray Zabel was number 1 of their draft board. They opted to pick the guard that can help bolster their interior offensive line.
And now the Seahawks still have more work to do. Other draft assets can certainly be used at other spots. Corbin, where are you looking for Seattle to bolster up now that you have a guy like Gray Zabel on your offensive line?
Now they've addressed their offensive line, there's a number of directions they can go. This is a really deep defensive line class, both at the tackle positions as well as edge rusher. I think there's a strong possibility that the Seahawks use one of their 2 second-rounders on a defensive lineman. And I think receiver, there's going to be a major run on wideouts in the early to middle second round. Maybe somebody like Jaden Higgins, the 6'4" receiver at Iowa State, or Jalen Royals, the playmaker out of Utah State, would make sense at 50 or 52. Those are the positions I think are the best bet there. Corner would be my 3rd selection. There's some pretty good corners still on the board as well.
And for continuing coverage of the Seattle Seahawks, subscribe to Locked On Seahawks wherever you get your podcasts. And for more on Gray Zabel, let's hear from Locked On NFL Draft. We spent a lot of time covering Gray Zabel up close.
Gray Zabel will help improve your interior offensive line as one of the better round 1 prospects in the 2025 NFL Draft. My name is Damian Parson. I am the lead host of the Locked On NFL Draft podcast, and Gray Zabel is a guy that has played 4 out of the 5 positions on the offensive line. He had a stellar week down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. A guy that comes from North Dakota State, technically a small school, was up for the task against the big dogs. And you talk about a guy that contained the yard with the big dogs on it. He was one of the biggest dogs who handled his business. This is a guy that understands how to use his wingspan at 32. He's going to play more as an interior offensive lineman. He can play both guard spots and center. If you need to improve your interior offensive line with a quick-footed, strong guard or strong offensive lineman, that will be Gray Zabel. And for more draft prospects, go subscribe to the Locked On NFL Draft podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
The pick is in.
With the 19th pick, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers select Emeka Egbuka, the wide receiver out of Ohio State. So let's bring in Locked On Bucs host James Yarko to break down the Bucs selection. Now, James, the Bucs have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Now it seems like it might be an embarrassment of riches, but were you surprised that they went out and got another receiver?
Stunned. Absolutely stunned. I was at a loss for words. Because, I mean, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and then Jaylen McMillan, the 3rd-round pick from last year, who, along with Jamar Chase, had the most touchdowns of any receiver in the NFL over the last 5 weeks of the season. And, the more I thought about it, the more it was like, okay, Todd Bowles has been telling us since February that this was going to happen. He was asked by the media, what positions are you looking at the combine? Without hesitation, he said receivers. He was asked again, about drafting offense. And he said, we're not going to sacrifice offensive talent for defensive needs. And of course, we've all thought edge rusher, cornerback, safety, linebacker. And here they come with Emeka Egbuka at pick 19. And you think about all the great receivers in Ohio State history, Joey Galloway and Santonio Holmes, Marvin Harrison Jr., Chris Olave, all these names. Emeka Egbuka is the school's all-time leading receiver, and he just got added to this offense that was already top 5 in the NFL in passing and rushing offenses. So this is actually kind of scary for a lot of teams that are going to have to go up against this Buccaneers offense.
Yeah, in fact, scary for a team like the one I cover here in Atlanta with the Atlanta Falcons. Like the Bucks were already the scariest with how Chris has torched them over the years. So imagine getting this guy to kind of add to the fold. And to your point, already having McMillan in the fold there as well. And you kind of mentioned some of it, James, but I want to go back to some of the things that you see just in terms of maybe what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers saw in Egbuka that said, hey, this guy has so much that he brings to the table. What are some of his advantages?
Well, first and foremost, one of the things that he does better than I think probably any receiver in that Buck or any receiver in the room for the Bucks is tracking the deep ball. And that's something that they've been lacking over the last couple of years. You know, Mike Evans is good at the deep ball. You know, Chris Godwin is all right. McMillan is all right, but they've been missing that connection since Baker Mayfield joined the team. And Egbuka is one of the best in college football at doing exactly that. And then just his ability to manipulate defenders, to find himself open on some of these routes. Like his footwork is next level. His route running is incredibly refined. He brings a little bit of speed. You know, a 4.4 840 isn't, you know, it's not top end speed, but it is some speed that the Bucks are lacking a little bit. So when Jason Light was talking about it, it's like, you know, this guy is a Chris Godwin clone. And when you have a clone of a player who Tom Brady had said had the best hands of any receiver he ever played with, why would you not want to bring that guy into the fold to not only help in the present, but be the future of this organization at the receiver position?
Yeah, you got to think that wide receivers coach Brian McClendon must be salivating right about now. But in addition to that, all of the good things that you just mentioned rather about him, what do you see as maybe some of those areas where he can be developed more, and that's something that Brian McClendon can actually work with? And again, to your point, James, he's got those veterans in Mike Evans and in Chris Godwin to be able to help him to move along.
He does need to get a little bit better about gaining separation out of his breaks. He's not quite as crisp as you would want him to be. And that's going to come with coaching and development and learning from, you know, the veteran receivers there, but it's also going to come with playing time. And I think that's kind of where we're going to be hampered the most watching Egbuka this year is where is he going to find the playing time when he's walking in as the wide receiver 4? I don't think he's going to stay the wide receiver 4 for very long, and he's going to get plenty of opportunities. This is a guy that just fits perfectly into what new offensive coordinator Josh Grizzard is going to want to do with the offense, run 4 receiver sets, spread the defense out, and that's going to allow Bucky Irving out of the backfield to do Bucky Irving things. So just top to bottom, this was a really great pick, and there's no pressure on him to be the guy right out of the gate, like his teammate Marvin Harrison Jr. was with Arizona last year as a top 5 pick. He can kind of absorb and relax a little bit and learn from a first ballot Hall of Famer in Mike Evans and learn from Chris Godwin and even kind of talk to Jaylen about the rookie struggles that he had and what caused him to go on that run late in the year. So this is the perfect spot for him. It really is a great pick for the Bucks. As surprising as it was, it's going to make this offense so much more dangerous.
Indeed. Appreciate the time, James, for continuing coverage of the Buccaneers. Subscribe to Locked On Buccaneers wherever you get your podcast. For more on Emeka Egbuka, let's hear from Locked On Buckeyes host Jay Stevens, who spent a lot of time covering Egbuka up close.
Emeka Egbuka runs his routes with the correct tempo and pace to excel in the National Football League. What is up, guys? My name is Jay Stevens, the host of Locked On Buckeyes. And Emeka Egbuka, standing at 6'1", 202 pounds, has the size and the speed to excel at either playing on the outside as a receiver or playing in the slot. Now, he's primarily going to be a slot, but he can be a utility player. Whatever the team needs from him, he can make that thing happen. Emeka Egbuka figures out the right way and time to manipulate the coverage. He is great at the line of scrimmage, and you can see time and time again on the film, he wins routes at the line of scrimmage. He beats the defender, and there's no way you can catch up with him. But another thing for Egbuka that I love about him so much is his ability to not shy away from run blocking. He is an elite run blocking wide receiver, which makes him an ideal candidate for any team at the next level. It's going to be fun to watch him play in the NFL.
The pick is in.
With the number 20 selection, the Denver Broncos select Jahdae Barron, cornerback from Texas, presented by LinkedIn. Here to talk about this with me, break it all down, it's Sayre Bedinger, one of the hosts over at Locked On Broncos. And Sayre, plenty of ways Denver could have gone with this pick. Now, we know Denver's defense was dominant last season. They add to it Pat Surtain, Riley Moss, now Jahdae Barron added into the fold. How do you like the pick and how do you like the fit?
Well, really excited about the pick because felt like outside of Travis Hunter, this was the best corner in the draft. And we know the Denver Broncos and George Paton, since his first draft with the team, they love taking corners high. It's not the first time fans have been upset with George for taking a corner over some more coveted Ohio State offensive players, which he did with Pat Surtain when Justin Fields was still on the board back in 2021. So love the player, very versatile, love the fit because I feel like he can slot right into that nickel corner position with Pat Surtain and Riley Moss on the outside.
Would you have preferred a running back? I know that a lot of people were maybe talking about the potential of a Marion Hampton being the pick here, or do you think that Jahdae Barron was too good of a talent to pass up at 20?
I think he was too good to pass up at 20 with the quality of depth at running back in this draft. And I think the Broncos really believe what George Paton said before the draft started at his pre-draft presser, which is we can get starting caliber guys in rounds 2 through 6. And I don't think that was just a GM saying stuff to fluff up a draft class, right? I think he really believes that. And so you go get the best guy on your board. And it's nice that the Broncos are in position to be able to do that after, they were still searching for a quarterback just last year.
And now Denver still has plenty of options as the draft rolls along. You mentioned running back later, maybe with how the draft is in terms of depth at that position. Where else are you looking for Denver to strengthen as the draft goes along?
I think playmakers around Bo Nix is the biggest thing. Running back, obviously, they thought maybe potential of a wide receiver in round 1, potential of a tight end in round 1. So I would say be keeping an eye on those positions. But the Broncos also really like the defensive line in this particular incoming class. So wouldn't be shocked even if they go back-to-back defensive picks here.
And you can get continuous coverage of the Denver Broncos. You can subscribe to Locked On Broncos wherever you get your podcasts. And for more on Jahdae Barron, let's hear from Locked On Longhorns, who spent a lot of time covering Jahdae Barron up close.
Jahdae Barron is that missing piece that your team's defense has been looking for. What's up, guys? BK, Brad Kellner here from Locked On Longhorns with a quick draft profile on Texas DB Jahdae Barron, maybe the most versatile player in this entire draft. How good is Jahdae Barron? This guy was an all-conference player at nickel back in 2023. He switched positions to play outside corner in 2024, and he won the Thorpe Award as the best defensive back in the country. Real deal right there. He can play corner. He can play nickel. He can play safety. He can play down in the box. He is a defensive coordinator's dream because of his versatility. Jahdae Barron was a huge part of Texas's success these last 2 years. He is a winning player that will undoubtedly get the job done in the NFL. For more on the Texas Longhorns, subscribe to Locked On Longhorns on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
The pick is in.
With the 21st pick, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Derek Harmon, defensive tackle, Oregon. Let's bring in Locked On Steelers host Chris Carter to break down this pick. So, Chris, you broke the news that the Steelers would go D-tackle with Harmon, as they did indeed. So, in addition to your intel and really your connectivity within the organization, what made you so confident that the Steelers would indeed go defense and go with Harmon?
Well, it was particularly defensive tackle because it was a huge need. You look at that playoff loss to the Ravens. It wasn't just Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry being. It was Tyler Linderbaum. It was that Ravens interior offensive line that outside of Cam Hayward, they were just moving guys off the ball. Guys like Larry Ogunjobi, Keanu Benton, they couldn't plug in the nose. They couldn't be a force in the middle, and that led to big problems. So the Steelers needed help in the middle part of the defense. You also look at their pre-draft visitors. They brought in 8 defensive tackles, 9 running backs, but the 8 out of the 8 defensive tackles, about 3 of those guys I slotted as potential first round guys. And Harmon, to me, was the best of the guys they brought in. Now, I had Kenneth Grant ranked higher than Derek Harmon, but Derek Harmon they loved. When I talked to Derek Harmon at the combine, Tanitra, he talked about Cam Hayward so much. He's like, that's the guy I model my game after. And you look at their builds; they're almost built the same exact way. I think Harmon, the guy's a little bit longer of arms, and I think Cam was a little bit heavier coming out of college, but they were built so similarly in college. And also Harmon leading all of college football's interior defensive linemen and pass rushing pressures. It just all added up to being the guy. And then going into tonight, I said, hey, Mike Tomlin, him hyping up Shedeur Sanders at the Tuesday press conference, I felt like that was the smokescreen to make you think, oh, they really want a quarterback here. They really want. So let's slot Shedeur Sanders. And then you wait till Thursday night. You make your pick. Everyone was worried about going a different direction. You get the guy that I think you wanted all along, and I think the Steelers fans should be ecstatic about this pick because I think Derek Harmon could be the next Cam Hayward for this team.
Well, I got to tell you, Chris, that I'm a Steelers fan. I follow the work that you do, and you're absolutely right. Your phone's been blown up. My phone's been blown up. Steeler Nation is really excited about this pick. So for you, when you look at what Harmon brings to the table, biggest day one contributions for him, but also areas of development so that he could be ready for day one for the Steelers team.
I think if he's still going to be in that second deployment of defensive tackles in the nickel formation, I think he'll be in the 3-4 formation for sure when they roll out defensive tackles. But when you look at the guys that could play, in the pass rushing game, he's going to be that first guy behind Keanu Benton and Cam Hayward, and that's what he's going to bring day one. He can rush the passer. He can split double teams. He's worked on his moves. He has the size. I think he has to learn how to win, not just with his athleticism as much in the NFL, but he has shown his ability to learn from Michigan State to Oregon, the different techniques to improve his game. That's what the Steelers are going to love about him. He's going to come in. He's going to learn. He's going to learn under Cam Hayward, a great person to teach him, and he can be that guy that gets after the quarterback coming off the bench and makes it so that they have depth on the interior defensive line, which they really didn't have this past year.
And you mentioned it earlier as well. You got to have that type of depth, and you got to give defensive coordinator Terrell Austin someone to work with when you think about going after a Lamar Jackson, going after a Joe Burrow, because you're going to need it to get out of this particular division, AFC North, which was one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult divisions in all of football last season. But listen, whether you call it purgatory, Chris, middling, meh, you think about where the Steelers have been, always sort of in that 20-21 range of picks in the first round for the last several years. So does this pick move the needle for the Steelers to even get out of the AFC North, especially with, let's just be honest, with there still being a need for a true QB1?
So by itself, no. The Steelers are still a team that's developing. Derek Harmon is a guy that's going to help them get there, but this team still needs a quarterback. But here was the issue is, and I know there's a lot of people sitting there saying, why didn't they take Shedeur Sanders? He's sitting right there. To me, I had Shedeur Sanders as a second-round pick, and you don't take second-round quarterbacks in the first round when you got guys that you think can be generational talents. And that's what I think is is what you get when you get a Derek Harmon. Sorry for the noise in the background here.
No problem at all. No problem at all.
We're in the mean streets of the North Shore of Pittsburgh. So, but in all seriousness, that's why they didn't go quarterback. I think I've been saying for months, and again, if you've been watching Locked On Steelers, as you should have been, I've been saying for months, back in January, this was not the quarterback class to go for. They're waiting for next year. And that's it. And like people didn't believe me. They were telling you all night, you're wrong, Chris, you're wrong. They're going Shedeur Sanders. Bang, they go Derek Harmon. I just believe me when I tell y'all stuff. I got real ears to the ground in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, no question at all. Like I am that person who's like, oh, I believed you. I believed you for like and you're so right, Chris, because if you pay attention to the tea leaves and you pay attention to the moves and the mannerisms that you've always seen from a Mike Tomlin, that should have also told people that they have more than enough information that they needed in order to figure out what this team was going to do. For continuing coverage of the Steelers, subscribe to Locked On Steelers wherever you get your podcast. And for more on Derek Harmon, let's hear from the Locked On Ducks host, Spencer McLaughlin.
Derek Harmon is one of the best and most well-rounded defensive tackles in the 2025 NFL draft class. Spencer McLaughlin here of the Locked On Ducks podcast. The team that drafts Derek Harmon is getting a guy who is ready to contribute right now. He's a guy who can make explosive plays in the run game. He can make explosive plays in the passing game. He literally ripped the ball away to create a turnover for the Ducks a season ago. That's the sort of impact that he makes on the field. Defenses have to know where he is at all times. He can make plays against the run. He can get to the quarterback. He is an explosive, dynamic defensive tackle that everybody is going to want in today's world where you want to get after the quarterback. Derek Harmon can be that guy. You want to be a run stuffing machine? Derek Harmon can be that guy. Quickness, power, agility. He has got it all. For more on the Oregon Ducks, check out Locked On Ducks Monday through Friday on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast.
The pick is in.
With the number 22 pick, the Los Angeles Chargers select Arman Hampton, running back from North Carolina, presented by LinkedIn. Here to dive into this with me, it is Dan Wade, one of the hosts over at Locked On Chargers. And Dan, a lot of places the Chargers could have gone with this selection, a lot of players available for the Chargers that maybe not a lot of people expected to be there. Ashton Genty goes to Las Vegas as the number 1 running back. Arman Hampton is number 2. How are you feeling about the pick?
I think with the way the board fell to them, I like the pick. And maybe we shouldn't be surprised when Jim Harbaugh and this new regime go offensive tackle with the 5th overall pick. And then after the running game still struggled in 2024, end up trying to find that franchise guy in the 2025 draft. I think with the way the board fell, with positional needs that they really had, defensive line being one of them, and the run that we saw on defensive tackles in the first round, and just the value of Arman Hampton, maybe one of the only true kind of first-round caliber players left on the board at a positional need for them. I didn't pick that to be the pick, but I do think I understand the direction they're trying to go and really committing to this running game. And if you're talking about a running back that was built for a Greg Roman type of running scheme, it would come out of the lab looking a lot like Arman Hampton does. So from that standpoint, I think they hit it on the head.
What are some of the strengths that you see Arman Hampton bringing to this Chargers team? You mentioned Greg Roman is very committed to running that football. Arman Hampton is a very intriguing player. Why do you think he was the pick for the Chargers at 22?
I think he's a pick because he really fits the kind of culture change that they are instilling in Los Angeles, which is a physical, rugged type of player that doesn't really need a lot of help to get his own kind of yardage and things like that. If he has to tough it out, he can. And he also, I think, maybe is a little underrated as far as maybe not being a true home run threat, but the amount of, 15, 20 plus yard runs that he can create with just his style of physicality. I think that it really is the biggest reason why the Chargers would go in this direction. They could have potentially, if they wanted a complimentary back to Najee Harris, went with a Travion Henderson. But this was a move made with the future in mind. Najee Harris is on a 1-year deal. This is a guy that can be Najee Harris for you in the next, for the next 5 years potentially. And I think another thing they're telling us with this pick is we're ready now. We're starting the window right now. We're taking a running back, which could be seen as a luxury pick instead of potentially a bigger need. We're going with a running back because we feel like we're right there and can maybe take the next step. And that starts with improving the running game. And I think Arman Hampton can bring that.
Still a lot of work to be done for the Chargers. Dan, where do you see the Chargers going with their remaining draft capital as they try to round out the roster?
Now that they ended up getting a running back, which I said could be seen as a luxury pick, it does leave some pretty big holes left on this roster. I think the edge rusher room is something that has to be addressed right now because Khalil Mack's on a 1-year deal. They need an heir apparent to him. And then I think just firepower offensively and the ability to protect Justin Herbert. Those jump to the top of the board now since they went running back in round 1. Finding an additional weapon, an additional pass catcher outside of Ladd McConkey would be huge. And also finding an improvement in the interior of the offensive line, whether that's a center, whether that's a guard that can come in and really compete for that starting left guard spot right away. If you're not protecting Justin Herbert and you don't get him another weapon, you kind of risk ending this season the way last season ended.
And for more coverage of the Los Angeles Chargers, you can subscribe to Locked On Chargers wherever you get your podcasts. So more on Arman Hampton. Let's hear from Locked On Tar Heels, who spent a lot of time covering Arman Hampton up close.
Arman Hampton is a bell cow 3-down back that will be a huge get for whatever franchise is fortunate enough to draft him. Hey there, it's Isaac Shade, the host of Locked On Tar Heels. Omarion Hampton has got everything you could want in your RB1: big play ability, pass protection, good hands in the pass game, and more. My favorite on-field trait of his is the absurd amount of yards after contact that he racks up every game. But here's what truly sets him apart to me. All Omarion Hampton cares about is winning, and he's committed to doing whatever he has to make that a reality. You know that Saquon Barkley video where he says, "I'd rather get the younger guys some reps than me try to set my single game rushing record"? Man, that is Omarion Hampton to a T. He's a head down, no frills, no ego, no locker room distractions, go to work, great teammate. Buy all the Omarion Hampton stock you can right now. For more on all things North Carolina Tar Heels, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Tar Heels wherever you get your podcasts.
The pick is in.
With the number 23 pick, the Green Bay Packers select Matthew Golden, wide receiver from Texas. Here to break it down with me is Peter Bukowski, the host of Locked On Packers. And Peter, man, 23 years since the Packers took a wide receiver in the first round, and it happens in Green Bay.
Yeah.
What was the energy like, and how do you like the pick?
Yeah, the energy. I mean, I'm in Green Bay for the draft. Had to be here for this, and it was a really special moment, Kevin, because Mark Murphy, who has stewarded one of the most successful runs of a Packers president. Remember, they don't have an owner; he is the president, and his last year is this. This is the crowning jewel, the crowning achievement. Bringing the draft to Green Bay is his Mona Lisa. And it's been an incredible event. And for him to get to announce the pick, and for him to be able to say for the first time in 22 years and to hear the crowd erupt. I mean, it was an electric atmosphere out there. 120,000 of Mark Murphy's closest friends agreeing with the pick. This was the position that I thought they would address. It's not the player that I thought they would address it with, but that's because, frankly, I thought Matthew Golden was going to be long gone. He was expected to go as early as 12 to the Dallas Cowboys. They took Tyler Booker instead, fortified that offensive line. But this, when you look at the history of Brian Gutekunst, they need you to have elite traits to be a first-round pick. And though Matthew Golden is not big, 5'11", 190, the fastest offensive player at the combine, 4.29. And I know there was a conspiracy that he didn't really run 4.29, but the Athletic reported that they talked to scouts that said, no, they had him at 4.29. They had him at 4.3 flat, 4.31. Like that, this was the range where he was running. And college football fans are going to remember the college football playoff, 4th and 13 against Arizona State. They need to score a touchdown in overtime to extend the game, and he gets open for a score deep. That's the kind of skill set he brings to Green Bay. Were there other players at that position that I liked better? Luther Burden? Yes. Does Luther Burden have off-field red flags? Does he have attitude red flags? Yeah, he does. And so there's information that I don't have, that I can't have. And that is right now how the Packers felt about those kinds of things. Matthew Golden is, by all accounts, a great kid, a great teammate. And that matters for a Packers team that is the youngest in the league. They want to make sure that they are bringing in quality people to that room.
What does Matthew Golden add to this room, and what's your overall assessment of it now that you can add Matthew Golden to it? Obviously, a lot of young talent in that room. Jordan Love gets another weapon, but as a whole, Peter, how do you feel this wide receiver room is, and how do you think it stacks up with the rest of the league?
Well, the second question is an interesting one to me that I think we can take some time over the offseason to reinvestigate. This was an offense that lacked explosiveness when Christian Watson was not out there. And it felt condensed in that Eagles game. Now, part of that was the Eagles defense is suffocating. They're going to put a lid on everything. But when you have someone who can win vertically, that makes your life so much easier. And when you look at what Steve Sarkisian did at Texas with Matthew Golden, so much of the bones of that offense is similar to what the Packers want to be, what they do. And even down to some of the weird things that Packers did with Malik Willis last year, like some of the single wing stuff, let's get in the gun and run concepts from 50, 60 years ago. Matt LaFleur does that. Steve Sarkisian does that. So there's, I think, going to be a nice little transfer there. Here's the other thing, Kev, like beating man coverage was a problem for the Packers last year. Christian Watson was their man beater the last 2 seasons. But not because he's a great route runner and not because he can just go. I know he's 6'4", 6'5", 215 pounds. He's not going up and over guys very often. It's that Matt LaFleur is really good at creating space. And when it's a guy who runs low 4.3s, or in Matthew Golden case, 4.29, and space, the player's going to win every time, because the defense is generally just not going to be able to. If you're going to play man coverage on a crosser, how do you run with Christian Watson across the field? How do you run with Matthew Golden across the field? And the Packers just didn't have the guy. When it's Dontavian Wicks, who runs 4.61, you don't have the same sort of opportunities to do that. And so then you either need someone to be a great route runner, or it's got to be all design. It's got to be rub routes. You got to be running mesh and these other things. And, teams are scouted. They're schooled on those things. You need someone who, just by force of athleticism, can create for you. And I think Matthew Golden can be that for the Packers.
Round 1 officially in the books. Peter, Green Bay not done yet. Where do you think they're going to look to address as the draft goes on? Because there are still plenty of really solid prospects available as we head into day 2.
I think defense, pass rusher, corner. There are way more corners are still on the board than I thought there would be at this point. I thought, Savone Revel from East Carolina had a chance to go in the first round. He's coming off an ACL. Benjamin Morrison has first round tape, the corner from Notre Dame, but he's got 2 hip injuries. That's an injury concern. Will Johnson has top 10 tape from the corner from Michigan. He's got an injury question. So those guys are starting to get pushed down. There's pass rushers that I thought had a chance to go in the first round, or are borderline, high second players, guys like Landon Jackson, JT Tuimoloau from Ohio State. Could they go interior with TJ Sanders from South Carolina? They have a lot of really good options on defense at 54, and then the world is their oyster after that.
For continuing coverage on the Green Bay Packers, subscribe to Locked On Packers wherever you get your podcasts. And for more on Matthew Golden, let's hear from Locked On Longhorns, who spent a lot of time covering Matthew Golden up close.
Matthew Golden is a future star who is going to make one team and one fan base very happy. What's up, guys and gals? BK Brad Kellner from Locked On Longhorns with a quick draft profile on Texas wide receiver Matthew Golden, one of the top wideouts in this year's NFL draft. Golden only spent 1 season in Austin, but man, he made the most of it. 58 catches, 987 yards, and 9 touchdowns. Those 9 touchdowns tied for the SEC lead. He was 3rd in the conference in receiving yards. He had no problem adjusting to life in the toughest conference in the sport. You want to talk about clutch? Go check out the route that Matthew Golden ran on 4th and 13 in overtime against Arizona State in the Peach Bowl. Season on the line, Golden runs the perfect double move to get open and makes the touchdown catch to keep the Longhorns season alive. Great catches, big catches, everything in between. Matthew Golden is the real deal. For more on the Texas Longhorns, subscribe to Locked On Longhorns on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
The pick is in.
With the number 24 pick, the Minnesota Vikings select Donovan Jackson, offensive lineman, Ohio State, presented by LinkedIn. Here to break this down with me is the host of Locked On Vikings, Luke Braun. Luke, you're bopping your head over there. You're having a good time. Seems like you're loving this pick. Tell me a little bit about how you're feeling.
Hey, this went better for us tonight than the Locked On mock draft did. I'll tell you that much. It was very interesting that the Vikings didn't use up their whole clock. There was so much about them trying to trade down. Chargers and Packers do that before. And then they just slammed this thing. I agree with that. I had Donovan Jackson as my favorite guard in this whole class. He is the most, the first word that comes to mind, he is a normal guard. There's no weird proposition. There's no stupid little caveat. He's just a straight up good player, blue blood school, plays good football. I think a lot of the bad things that happened to him were because of he's just not the rangiest. He doesn't have the most range in his footwork. But all that stuff happened when he was out at tackle, where he was only playing to fill in for Josh Simmons' injury. When he was in at guard, excellent pass protector, technical. I love what he does with his hands. I love the way he sets up with his feet. He's got sand in his pants, anchor, all of that stuff. Good recovery if something does happen. If he gets an arm defeated, he can reset it quickly. And just a mauler in the run game. So just set him up with Christian Darrisaw whenever he returns to the field when he's healthy. Get a double team on guys and say good night. We're going to beat everybody with hammers. This is the Vikings now.
Tell me about this offensive line with Donovan Jackson in it now. How much more confident are you feeling? Minnesota obviously added a lot of guys this offseason. They revamped part of their offensive line. This is the latest addition to that. How much more confident are you feeling now going into this season than you were heading into last year?
So if you remember that playoff game last year, everybody watched 9 sacks, total O-line meltdown. Of the players on the field that game, one of them is still playing for the Vikings, and that's Brian O'Neill. Christian Darrisaw scheduled to return, but even the backup for him is probably Justin School, who's better than David Quessenberry, or who's going to be better, I think, than Cam Robinson was. The entire interior is different now. Assuming that, I mean, he'll have to earn his job. Donovan Jackson will have to earn his job, beat out Blake Brandel. That'll probably be a camp competition in formality, and you would hope that he can kind of win that job. But they've replaced Garrett Bradbury with Ryan Kelly. They've replaced Ed Ingram with Will Fries. They've upgrade. This is now a team that I feel like can approach games the way the Lions do, where we can just kind of say, hey, we're just going to run super simple run plays all day long till you have to overcommit to something, because we can kick the crap out of you at every position. And once you overcommit to something, then we throw the counterpunch at you, and then things can sort of snowball from there. The Lions had this like snowball effect. I think the Vikings have done a great job of building an offense that can do that same snowball effect as long as JJ McCarthy is okay. He doesn't even have to be amazing. He has to be better than Nick Mullins. Like, we're in a spot where we can be that team. And I think the question marks for the Vikings lie now entirely on the defensive side of the ball.
Now, the Vikings still have draft capital to work with. Now that you have Donovan Jackson in the fold, where else are you looking as the draft goes on for Minnesota?
D-tackle. So the Vikings signed 2 D tackles, Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave. They're both over 30. They're both coming off injuries. So while they did acquire a lot at that position, there's still reason to want a long-term plan, a backup plan if injuries come back, right? Like, there's a lot of reason to want to bolster the depth. The Vikings do have good D-tackle depth too. They've got a couple of guys you probably haven't heard of that played pretty well in like Taki Taimani or Jalen Rendon. But a kind of a long-term answer at that position would be really exciting, but also they need so bad in the secondary. Somebody like Malachi Starks or Nick Emenwari would have been awesome here, but now the Vikings aren't up again till pick 97. So we're starting to talk about like Billy Bowman or some of these are like 3rd round guys that you can get. And we're looking for who's the sleeper kind of deal. The Vikings were really motivated to trade down, and they must have talked a lot to the Giants, who just traded up and then they picked Jackson Dart pick later. And so I'm pretty surprised that they didn't wait the clock out a little bit more and they just went up and slammed it. But I get feeling that excited about Donovan Jackson, because so am I.
For continuing coverage of the Minnesota Vikings, subscribe to Locked On Vikings wherever you get your podcasts. And for more on Donovan Jackson, let's hear from Locked On Buckeyes, who spent a lot of time covering Donovan Jackson up close.
Donovan Jackson has the measurables, the power, and the movement to be a starting guard in any scheme in the National Football League. What is up, guys? My name is Jay Stevens, the host of Locked On Buckeyes, and Donovan Jackson's power at 6'4", 315 pounds shows up all over the film. Matter of Ohio State called a gap run scheme or a zone run. He is a guy that also has the athleticism to excel in the zone run or playing left tackle, where in the middle of the season, he had a bump out to left tackle due to injuries the Buckeyes offensive line had, where he showed off his athleticism in space and was a force out on the outside and quickly figured out how to use his length, how to use his size, how to use his speed, even his power on the outside playing a new position. But ideally for Donovan Jackson, he is a guard, a starting guard that can provide an impact on day one in the NFL.
Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. Play high-quality Xbox games at a fraction of the cost of a console. Already have a console? A Fire TV Stick 4K device is more affordable and easier to travel with, allowing you to take you or your kids' games wherever you plug in. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K, 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max, 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube, 3rd Gen.
The pick is in.
25th pick, the New York Giants select Jackson Dart, quarterback, Ole Miss. Let's bring in Locked On Giants host Patty Traina to break down the pick at 25. So, Patty, the Giants go back to the well to get their guy under center from Oxford. What do you like about the pick of Dart at maybe a safer 25 versus a pick at 6 like Daniel Jones in 2019? But Harkening back to another nice pick from Oxford.
Yeah, the Eli Manning connection, right? Giant fans are only hoping that Jackson Dart turns into the next Eli Manning. But no, seriously, I like this pick because it wasn't a reach. At a certain point, I think in the draft order, you were getting into second round territory. So really what the Giants did, they gave up their second round pick, which, you kind of figured was going to be part of the cost. They gave up one of their third round picks, which, we figured would be the case. And I think they gave a future pick as well. I think it was a future 3. So really not a bad deal. If you think about it, if Jackson Dart turns out to be the next franchise quarterback for this team, it's really been, it's a good deal. And it's a lot less than what it cost them to get Eli Manning back in the day.
True. So what do you feel like when you look at Jackson Dart? What's the upside that you see for him, and maybe what's the biggest developmental piece for him?
Yeah, so a lot of Jackson Dart, there's some similarities to what Josh Allen brought to the table. And of course, Brian Dable, Josh Allen, we all know the story there. He's a big kid. He's got good size, a good arm. He's got some development to do. Obviously, that system down in Ole Miss is a little, unorthodox, if you will. But Brian Dable did a lot of work on him. He mentioned that, the system has its roots to what they did in Alabama. So he didn't think it would be a big transition for the guy to learn it. But Jackson Dart has to come in here. He's got to learn the playbook. The Giants' offense is not easy to learn. Every player I talk to tells me that. He has to obviously, learn how to be a pro because, being a pro in college and being a pro in the NFL, 2 different things. But a lot of upside, a lot of hope for him, and we'll just see how he develops.
Yeah. And you're right. Interestingly enough, that QB room has gotten a little bit tighter. Now, there were reports that the Giants had named Russell Wilson as the starting QB. So I guess theoretically no competition between Russ, Jameis Winston, Jackson Dart, but still, is there a legitimate chance or a way where you can see a path that could change where maybe the Giants have a change of heart and go with Dart?
It all depends on how he develops. I think the plan this year is to have him sit behind the 2 veterans. That's why they brought them in. That was really the plan last year had the Giants been able to trade up.
Yeah.
So they're not in a rush to necessarily get Jackson Dart out on the field. That's what they did with Daniel Jones in retrospect, and we all know how that worked out. So, they built up a better ecosystem now for Jackson Dart, one that they feel that he will thrive in.
Yeah.
And we'll see how he develops throughout the year and whether he gets his opportunity.
Yeah, and I like the word that you used there, the ecosystem that they built around Jackson Dart, I think will be a good one for him. And yeah, taking the pressure off of him. Granted, coming from the SEC, obviously there's a different level of pressure coming out of the SEC, but ultimately speaking, there's a whole other level of pressure from the NFL that maybe he won't have to deal with, at least not in the beginning. So giving a good opportunity for Jackson Dart to kind of get in rhythm with what the Giants want to run and then kind of thrive from there. I'm sure that Brian Dable and Joe Schoen are certainly hoping so. Appreciate the time, Patty, and for continuing coverage of the Giants, subscribe to Locked On Giants wherever you get your podcasts. And for more on Jackson Dart, let's hear from Locked On SEC host Chris Gordy, who's spent a lot of time covering Jackson up close.
Jackson Dart is a sleeping giant in this year's NFL draft. What's up, everybody? Chris Gordy here from Locked On SEC, and Jackson Dart is the guy that a lot of scouts seem to be sleeping on among the quarterbacks in this draft. Of course, Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders get a lot of the attention, but you look at some scouts, they look at Jackson Dart, and they have raved about his arm talent. A guy who finished 3rd in all of college football last season in passing yards. He got better every year at Ole Miss. Played as a freshman at USC, transferred over to Oxford, where he was able to be molded by Lane Kiffin. 3,300 passing yards in 23. 4,200 passing yards last season, 72 career touchdown passes in 3 seasons at Ole Miss. But how about as much as they threw it? Just 5 interceptions in 23 and only 6 last season. He takes care of the football for as much as they throw it. And you got to love his running ability too. I mean, that is something that, is underrated in the NFL with quarterbacks. You got to be able to move over 1,500 career rushing yards with over a dozen rushing touchdowns as well. Jackson Dart can move, and some concern about his ability to run a pro-style offense. I get it, maintaining that poise in the pocket. And you look at Lane Kiffin's quarterbacks he's coached, guys like Matt Barkley and Matt Corral. A question if Dart will fold into a mold of those guys. But to me, if Dart goes to a team with an offensive coordinator that understands his strengths and weaknesses, there's a chance we could look back and say Jackson Dart was perhaps the best quarterback in that 2025 NFL draft. For more on the SEC, subscribe to Locked On SEC wherever you get your podcasts.
The pick is in.
With the number 26 pick, the Atlanta Falcons select James Pierce, edge from Tennessee, presented by LinkedIn. Here to break this down with me, it is Aaron Freeman, the host of Locked On Falcons. Aaron, the Falcons had a pick earlier in the draft. They decide they were not done. They wanted to move up and pick again. Hefty haul the Falcons gave up for James Pierce. Let's start with that. How did you like the package that Atlanta gave up? Because the Rams, they wanted some draft capital to move back, and Atlanta certainly gave it to them.
Yeah, the Falcons only had 5 picks going into the draft, so I did not expect the Falcons to trade up because they needed to trade down to get more than 5 picks given some of their holes. But giving up a future first is certainly going to be something that is going to be a little questionable just because there's a little bit of pressure on Raheem Morris, the head coach, and general manager Terry Fontenot. And are they on the hot seat? If the team does not win this season, 7 years without a winning record, are they going to be out? And did they just trade the next general manager's potential first-round pick? So that's going to be the question. But it's a big, bold move for the Atlanta Falcons to double dip at edge. They double dipped at quarterback last year. I guess this is just the Terry Fontenot MO to just, hey, we got a problem. We're going to take 2 swings at it and hope that at least we hit a home run with one of them. And, things are looking up for Michael Penix. So I think, things are looking potentially positive for them to hit at least on one of these edge rushers in round 1.
Yeah, well, James Pierce, Aaron, certainly one of the more controversial players in this draft. Talent sky high, through the roof, potential through the roof. Obviously, some off-field concerns that I'm sure some teams might have had him off of their board. Atlanta clearly feels confident enough to trade all this capital to move up and get him. What is your take on James Pierce and what he can bring to Atlanta? And do you think that the risk is worth it that Atlanta took here?
I don't know, Kevin, if the risk is worth it. That's where I am at with James Pierce, because you see the talent, you see the tools, and then you hear all the things, behind the scenes. His Tennessee coaching staff apparently didn't necessarily love him and felt like he was kind of checked out this year. Maybe reading some of the press clippings from, last summer where he was projected to be potentially the number 1 overall pick in this draft class. And then you watch the film this past year and you see again the flashes of that ability that made people think that he could be one of the best pass rushers in this draft class. But then you also see some inconsistency in this game. And is that due to that sort of checked out ability? But he's going to be playing alongside another rookie that has A++ character. And so maybe the Falcons are hoping in Jaylen Walker that, some of that ability rubs off via osmosis for James Pierce Jr. And he knows that he's going to have to come in here and work his tail off if he's going to get on the field, because they got another guy in that room that is also here to hunt the quarterback.
Well, we know not a lot of picks left for Atlanta at this current juncture after this. I mean, where are you on the Falcons roster right now? And how do you think that the Falcons can maximize their remaining draft picks to really help bolster out the remaining parts of what they need?
Yeah, right now they have a 3rd round pick, a 4th round pick, and a 7th round pick. They got still some holes to plug on defense. We'll see if they use that on defense. There's been a lot of talk that maybe they'll go offensive tackle, but they can use as much help as possible on the defensive side of the ball in the secondary. That position that they seemingly, hopefully, have solved their pass rush needs at this point in time with 2 big swings of the bat. But yeah, I'm hoping in the 3rd round that maybe they can get some cornerback help, because that was also a problem area for this football team. Not as problematic as the pass rush, but still an area that needs a significant upgrade.
For continuing coverage of the Atlanta Falcons, subscribe to Locked On Falcons wherever you get your podcasts. And for more on James Pierce, let's hear from Locked On Vols, who spent a lot of time covering James Pierce up close.
James Pierce Jr. is a really solid football player in the making. Hey, I'm Eric Kane, host of Locked On Vols, and what an NFL team is getting in James Pierce Jr. is a guy that's got quick twitch, tons and tons of athletic ability, and a guy that's getting better at defending the run from the edge, setting the edge, forcing everything back inside. But again, he is a pass rushing specialist. His stats speak for themselves at the University of Tennessee, and he'll work on being a pass rushing specialist in the NFL to being a 3-down football player. He's a bit of a project, but the athletic ability speaks for itself. That is James Pierce Jr. For more on James Pierce Jr. and any Tennessee prospect, check out Locked On Vols wherever you get your podcast.
The pick is in.
With the 27th pick, the Baltimore Ravens select Malachi Starks, the safety out of Georgia. So let's bring in Locked On Ravens host Kevin Oestreicher to talk about Malachi. Listen, Kevin, I covered Malachi Starks for his entire time, his 3 years at UGA. I think this is a really great pick for the Ravens at 27. I've even heard people call him a home run for this Ravens organization. But what do you think about this pick for Baltimore?
I think it is. I think home run is a great word to describe it. The Ravens had the board fall to them pretty perfectly. And Eric DeCosta, the Ravens GM, essentially said that, if Malachi was gone, the Ravens had another guy that they would have loved to take. But Malachi, it was reported earlier a couple of days ago that he was their dream selection. And certainly Baltimore gets their guy here. And for Malachi, he frees up a lot on this Ravens defense, the big one being Kyle Hamilton, which is a big storyline, but just the player that he is, having the range, the ball tracking ability, his ability to play all over the field and be a versatile piece. The Ravens love the positionless defense. They love moving everybody around, confusing offenses, giving offenses different looks, and Malachi fits into that. The safety position, although Kyle Hamilton is a big member of that group, Marcus Williams was a disaster last season. Eddie Jackson was a disaster last season. They had to move guys around, not because they wanted to, but because it was their only hope to help improve that defense. Now with Malachi in, you have so many other options, and I think it helps Baltimore, especially on the defensive side of the ball, as they help to continue their strong second half of the year they had last year.
Yeah, I feel like there is Zach Orr, defensive coordinator, just kind of salivating about the upside of what Starks brings to the table. But Kyle Hamilton has to be feeling that way as well. So when you think about just what you mentioned, the upside for Starks, as far as linking up with Kyle Hamilton, my goodness, Kevin, the fits that those folks are going to bring to the secondary, particularly to my Steelers, I think is going to be diabolical.
And I love it. And I completely agree with you, where they moved Kyle Hamilton to be a deep safety last season, as I mentioned, out of necessity because they really had no other options. Hamilton played great on the back end last season, but he is at his best when you can move him around the field, put him up in the box, blitz him off of the edge, and not limit him to just being in the deep part of the field. Now, Malachi Starks brings you that versatility, and it's almost kind of like a perfect combination of Hamilton can be that physical up at the line safety. You can put him in the slot as you can with Malachi Starks, and that's just what they love, where Marlon Humphrey you can put in the nickel, or Darius Washington you can put in the nickel as well. And with Kyle Hamilton, there were questions about, did the Ravens want to keep him in the deep part of the field? Now, there are other possibilities. Maybe the Ravens draft a deep safety later and they get a big safety. Like, there are plenty of other ways that this could go. But for Malachi Starks, a guy that, again, people had going maybe to Minnesota, maybe as a trade-up candidate for a lot of teams, Baltimore let the board fall to them, as they always do. They did it with Kyle Hamilton back in 2022, and he fell into the laps. Again, Malachi Starks falls into Baltimore's laps, and they didn't even have to lift a finger. They got one of the best players in this draft, in my opinion.
Yeah, they just have a sneaky good way of getting these players just kind of staying the course and getting the player that they want. And I'm sure, just like we talked about Zach Orr and the excitement that he has, obviously, I'm sure Don DeLessio is excited about this pick as well. But what is maybe that one thing that you want to see the DB coach, you want to see the DC really help Starks to work on so that he can be ready for this Ravens defense, this Ravens secondary day one?
Yeah, I just think catching up for Malachi Starks is definitely going to be his role, because I feel like sometimes with these teams, you can put a guy in a specific role. It doesn't work. You want to move them all around. And sometimes that can be too much for a young player at the NFL level. Like, Malachi Starks has a proven track record of doing that in college, and that cannot be questioned. But obviously the NFL is a different beast. So I just say, leading up to training camp, rookie mini camp, preseason, just making him feel comfortable. He is really an all-around player. I know that there are some concerns about the size for Malachi Starks, but I don't think that's going to be, it's not like he's a 5'8" safety. He still has a physical build to him. He's just not Nicky Minwari, who obviously that is like the pinnacle of safety builds. He's like a Kyle Hamilton. So the Ravens didn't need two Kyle Hamiltons. That they are fine with just one. I think Malachi Starks complements what Baltimore needed at the position. And again, just figuring out where he fits best. That doesn't mean don't move him around at all. That certainly is going to be a big part of what Malachi does in Baltimore. But I just think don't throw too much at him at first, even though I'm sure he can handle it. Malachi is a very smart football player, a very smart person. But I do think that for Baltimore, getting him acclimated at one spot, then moving him to another, then another, instead of having him go here, then back there, lay out a plan, make the plan, and execute it. I think that's the best course of action for Malachi Starks.
Yeah, and you get to see him play at that highest level. Appreciate the time, Kevin, and for continuing coverage of the Ravens. Subscribe to Locked On Ravens wherever you get your podcasts. And for more on Malachi Starks, let's hear from Locked On Bulldogs host Clint Shamblin, who spent a lot of time covering Malachi up close.
Clint Shamblin, Locked On Bulldogs here, talking about Malachi Starks. And this is why Malachi Starks is going to be one of your favorite players for your team. Coming into this draft, he is one of the most athletic, heady, smart, high IQ in terms of football guy that there is. Kirby Smart loves getting safeties, Tyke Smith, Christopher Smith, Richard LeCount, who are athletic, ball-hawking, tackling machines. And that's exactly what Malachi Starks. Play one that he was at Georgia. Beautiful turnaround ball hawking interception against Oregon, and he did not let up ever since that first play. Memorable as it may be, he's actually better at being a leader on the field, being a guy who's not out of position. He can run with any tight end, any wide receiver going up the seam. He could play over the top coverage, and coming downhill, he is a menace in the tackling game against the run. Malachi Starks should be first round. He's going to be talented, 10 plus years in the league doing all of this and more. Malachi Starks, Georgia Bulldogs.
The pick is in.
With the 28th pick, the Detroit Lions select Mykel Williams, defensive lineman, Ohio State, presented by LinkedIn. Here to talk about this with me, it's Matt Derry, the host over at Locked On Lions. Matt, we saw a run on defensive linemen early in this draft. The Lions, towards the back end of the first round, they take Mykel Williams, who some had in this range, others maybe early to mid second round pick. How are you feeling about the selection for Detroit?
I mean, I feel okay, Kevin. I mean, this is classic Brad Holmes, really kind of keeping us in the dark on where they were, what they were thinking. He said they were going to take best available player. He said they were not going to just grab an edge rusher because that was a need, or an offensive lineman because that was a need. They were going to stick with best player on their board. There were some very good edge rushers on the board, including Mike Green, the nation's leader in sacks, with 17 last year at Marshall, but some off the field issues with him. Kind of kept the Lions away. Jihad Campbell also would have been a great fit. Shoulder surgery kind of kept the Lions away. They take a guy, like you said, that a lot of mock drafts didn't have in the first round, in Mykel Williams. And, Holmes said at the owners' meetings a couple of weeks ago that they were kind of loaded in terms of interior defensive linemen. Yet they take a big man to pair with Aleem McNeil, DJ Reader, Levi Onwuzurike, Josh Paschal. They've got a lot, but if this is the guy that they have graded the highest, that's where they were going, and that's what they did.
Talk to me about Detroit's defensive line rotation now with Mykel Williams in there. Obviously, Detroit is looking to build off of last season and hopefully make a Super Bowl run. How does Mykel Williams help that defense out in achieving that?
Well, I mean, I think he's going to be playing a lot, at least in September, next to DJ Reader at, kind of at that nose tackle spot, because he's got a Aleem McNeil type body. He is a very good run stuffer, 8th best run stuffer in college last year, according to Pro Football Focus. But what's interesting is what happens when Aleem McNeil comes back in October or November from his ACL? What if DJ Reader's playing well on the last year of his deal? Does this mean that Reader could be a June 1st cut if they've got Mykel Williams, if they've got Levi Onwuzurike back? I mentioned Paschal before, Roy Lopez, who they signed from the Cardinals. They've got a lot going on the interior, and I think fans would probably be a little bit surprised that it was an interior defensive lineman and not an edge.
Well, you mentioned that. Are there any other players you had your eye on? This board fell very favorably for the teams in the back half of the first round. Was there anybody you were eyeing aside from Mykel Williams? You mentioned not a lot of people had him in the first round category, and there were some players that fell. Was this your ideal pick for Detroit, or would you have gone somewhere else?
It wasn't my ideal pick, but I think once Gray Zabel was off the board, who I think the Lions really liked as an interior offensive lineman, and he went way earlier to Seattle. I mentioned before Jihad Campbell, I'm surprised, was sitting there at 28, but again, the injury, Mike Green. I think Donovan Ezuraku was somebody they considered, just a tremendous character guy. Nick Scorton, another great character guy. Both those guys, Scorton and Ezuraku, edge rushers. But I know I'm a broken record here, Kevin. This is the best player on their board, and that's what they did. They went out and got a guy in Mykel Williams that really is smart, knows where the football is, has great eyes, great movement for a big man, and Brad Holmes likes drafting Big Ten players, And he likes drafting interior linemen, whether it's on offense or defense. So he's bolstering that line. And if Lee McNeil's health is not great and maybe coming back from that torn ACL takes longer, this kid will get plenty of reps.
For continuing coverage of the Detroit Lions, subscribe to Locked On Lions wherever you get your podcasts.
Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
The pick is in.
With the 29th pick, the Washington Commanders select Josh Connerly, offensive tackle out of Oregon. So let's bring in Locked On Commanders host David Harrison to download on this pick. So for you, David, the Commanders, I'll say for everyone, really, they were a pleasant surprise last season, especially on an offense powered by Offensive Rookie of the Year, Jayden Daniels. So what does it mean for this offense to add even another piece to protect their star QB in a guy that had the fastest 10-yard split of any O-lineman at the combine?
Yeah, I mean, look, it checks a lot of blocks for the Commanders, right? First of all, it's the continuation of the offseason that has been all about giving Jayden Daniels the best platform to continue what has already begun as a stellar career. Like you mentioned, Offensive Rookie of the Year. Laramie Tunsil is your left tackle, Deebo Samuel, a new wide receiver. And then here in the very first pick of the draft that they have this year, they go out and get another offensive lineman who they're actually not committing to being a right tackle necessarily. General Manager Adam Peters told us that the only offensive line spot that's fixed right now is left tackle. Laramie Tunsil is going to be the left tackle. Everything else is up for grabs. So this first round rookie, he's not being handed a job just like everybody else last year. He's going to have to come in, prove himself, earn it. But you mentioned that athleticism, and that is something that a Washington Commanders offensive lineman has to have. This is a team that likes to run left. They like to run right. They obviously have a mobile quarterback, so you need to be able to stay in front of them and help them, protect them, and let them extend plays and help them downfield and all those things. They also like their linemen to get to the second level and help spring some runs and things like that. So they're looking to improve there and all those things as well. And, you know, it really just kind of shows the accuracy and the self-scouting, because while Jayden Daniels was in the Commanders, quote unquote, were actually one of the least sacked teams in the NFL last year, they were third highest in pressures surrendered. So it just kind of shows you, like, Jayden did a lot of amazing things, but what you would like to do is not make Jayden do as many amazing things with his legs so that he can do even more of them with his arm. And this is one other step towards doing that.
Yeah, and they definitely got some amazing things at times from Brian Robinson. And you mentioned it about getting to that second level. So another skill that Connerly has been lauded about. Obviously, we talked about sealing the edge, working up to that second level, cutting off those backside defenders. So how important will that be for Robinson to continue to help bolster the Commanders' run game by what they're getting out of Connerly?
Yeah, you know, everybody would love to have a running back that can just like create magic and make holes where there are no holes or find space where there was no space before. But the truth of the matter is those running backs are very rare. They're very hard to find. Most running backs, they need a lane. They need offensive linemen to create holes for them, and they need, you know, schemes to accentuate their strengths and all those things. And I think you saw Brian Robinson Jr. specifically, but really the Washington Commanders running backs, if you go back to the first half of the season last year, top 5 in yards per carry for the running back position. Back half of the season, injuries set in, fatigue set in, and the offensive line wore down a little bit. And in the back half of the season, I think they fell like 29th or 30th overall, and ultimately just not effective enough of a run game to help them in the postseason get to their ultimate goal of going to the Super Bowl. So yeah, back or you get a better offensive line. Some Commanders fans believe that maybe a better running back is coming in. We'll see what the Commanders decide to do in days 2 and 3 and how that pans out. But at the bottom, or at a minimum, improving the offensive line, because Laramie Tunsil displaces Brandon Coleman. If Josh Connerly comes in to be the right tackle, Brandon Coleman shifts inside to be guard. If he proves to be a better guard than one of the ones they already have slotted to start, then you're just improving the entire unit, and all of that is going to help not just protect Jayden, but like you mentioned, give more running lanes for Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler, and maybe a rookie to be named later.
True. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. You kind of looked at what you saw in the beginning of the season with the Commanders in that run game, and I'm sure they'd like to get back there as well, because there's nothing like being able to have that versatility so that they can get one step further in the postseason and obviously one step closer to getting back to the Super Bowl. Another thing you mentioned, David, that I really like and can appreciate is, hey, other than Larry McTunsell, there's competition across that O-line. So for Connerly, what does he have to do to put himself in position? What does he need to develop to be ready for day one to potentially be a starter for Washington?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that you have to remember if you're Josh Connerly Jr. is what you've done already, they like. Who you presented yourself to be, they like. So really all you have to do is make them realize that you're not a liar, right? Like if you went in to all these meetings with them, they met him at the Senior Bowl, the Combine, top 30. So it's kind of hard to pull the wool over a team's eyes that many times, right? But if you show up to Ashburn, Virginia for work and they go, oh, you're not actually the guy we thought you were, well, you're going to get found out. So as long as you're telling the truth about yourself, continue to tell the truth about yourself, be a hard worker, be a competitor, and just understand, which I think most of these guys do, that nothing is going to be given to you. You're not going to start until you're ready to start, and you've proven that you're better than at least 3 or 4 other guys who could have that position ahead of you. So if Josh Connerly comes with that spirit, that attitude, then he'll be just fine.
Appreciate the time, David. And for continuing coverage of the Commanders, subscribe to Locked On Commanders wherever you get your podcast. And for more on Josh Connerly, let's hear from Locked On Ducks host Spencer McLaughlin, who spent a lot of time covering Josh up close.
Josh Connerly can start for your NFL team today, and you'll like what you are getting. Spencer McLaughlin of the Locked On Ducks podcast here. Connerly, one of the best and most highly touted offensive tackles in this draft with good reason. Over the last couple of years, allowed fewer than 5 sacks as Oregon's starting left tackle. He protected Bo Nix. He protected Dylan Gabriel on the front and blind side respectively, and did a phenomenal job with both. He began his career as a guy who just came in a jumbo package and run blocking situations, evolved his game, and took a big step forward as a junior. He's been a late riser over the last couple months among NFL drafts experts because he has been phenomenal, particularly this past year. You go look at what he did against Abdul Carter, future top 10 pick in the Big Ten championship game. You'll see just about all you need to know. For more on the Ducks, check out Locked On Ducks on YouTube Monday through Friday, wherever you get your podcasts.
The pick is in.
With the 30th pick, the Buffalo Bills select Maxwell Hairston, cornerback from Kentucky. Let's bring in Locked On Bills host Joe Marino to download on the pick. So what do you like about this pick, Joe, and what Maxwell Hairston can bring to the secondary room for this Buffalo Bills team?
Well, the Bills had a big need at cornerback across from Christian Benford, where they brought back some familiar faces recently in Dane Jackson and Tre'Davious White, but you're really looking for some ceiling, some upside, someone that can really pair long-term with Christian Benford. And I think the Bills found an exciting answer that brings a new dimension to their cornerback room with the speed dynamic that he offers. The Bills have traditionally had some slower cornerbacks, but that's not the case with Maxwell Hairston, who runs in the 4.2s, guy that can really run and cover. And I think he brings an aggressive demeanor to this defense, a guy that I think can play in a lot of different coverage techniques, but whatever he does, he's very aggressive. He's a guy that really hunts the football. And so you want corners that can take away the ball. I think he's got plus ball skills, and boy, he's aggressive. So speed, athleticism, youth to the cornerback room and filling a big hole across from Christian Benford.
Yeah, indeed. And when you kind of think about it, to your point, where he fits in, he's a guy that they could potentially want to see, hey, what are the results that you can bring to the table for this Buffalo Bills secondary on day one? So obviously we talked about some of the good that he brings to the table, but what for you do you see are some of the things that Maxwell needs to develop maybe to get himself ready to be impactful for day one?
Well, I think the thing with Hairston that's interesting is he's a very aggressive physical corner, but he doesn't necessarily have the frame to match. He's about 183 pounds at the combine. Now, reports are that he's bulked up over 190 pounds, but if you're going to be an aggressive dude that likes to hit and hunt, you got to have some mass to you at the next level. And of course, he missed some time this past season with a shoulder injury, and that's something to be mindful of. So I think it's about getting the body right, getting the frame, develop the muscle mass necessary to be the same type of aggressive player he was in college for the Buffalo Bills.
And obviously, if you're picking at 30, that means you did something right to get almost to the promised land. But Joe, is this the piece? Obviously, there may be one or two more pieces, but is this one of the key pieces that the Buffalo Bills need in order for them to be the team that we're talking about representing the AFC in the Super Bowl come 2026?
Yeah, the 30th pick in the draft is the worst
pick,
position
right?
to organically pick. It means you lost the conference championship game. So obviously the Bills would like to pick a little bit lower in the future years. But I think the Bills came into this draft with three primary needs, cornerback being one of them, defensive tackle and defensive end being the other. And the Bills have two day two picks, two second-round picks at their disposal to continue attacking these needs on the defensive side of the football. And so they check a big box with corner, but obviously work to do on Friday night. And hopefully the Bills can come away with some impact players for the defensive line to really get this defense at a point where it can be consistent in the playoffs and stop letting Josh Allen down in these big playoff elimination games. I mean, Josh is out there putting up points. The offense has been really good. The defense continues to let them down, and hopefully the Bills can assemble a draft class that can help build a Super Bowl caliber defense to complement the NFL MVP and Josh Allen.
For continuing coverage of the Bills, subscribe to Locked On Bills wherever you get your podcast. And for more on Maxwell Hairston, let's hear from Locked On Kentucky host Lance Daw, who spent a lot of time covering Maxwell up close.
Maxwell Hairston is a straight-up ball hawk, one of the most electric cornerbacks in this entire draft class. Hi, I'm Lance Dahl, host of the Locked On Kentucky podcast, and Hairston isn't just another defensive back with speed. He led the SEC in interceptions 2 seasons ago, and 2 of those were returned for touchdowns in a single game. He's got blazing 4.28 speed, fluid hips, and elite anticipation in zone, but what separates Hairston here is his football IQ. As Kid Lee reads quarterbacks like a book, and he attacks the ball very well. He's still filling out his frame, sure, but the upside here with his athleticism and anticipation is massive. Any team that runs a zone-heavy scheme or needs help over the top should be circling his name. For more on Kentucky prospects, you can subscribe to the Locked On Kentucky podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
The pick is in.
With the 31st pick, the Philadelphia Eagles select Jahad Campbell, linebacker out of Alabama. Let's bring in Locked On Eagles host Louis DiBiase to give a little conversation and a little breakdown on why the Eagles did a little switcheroo at the end of the first round, moving from the 32nd pick to the 31st pick. What do you think about that move, Louis?
Yeah, I like it a lot. I think the Eagles were working the phones, trying to get up into the 20s for a pass rusher. I think they were trying to hold off other teams from moving up to 31 to get Jahad Campbell. This is a versatile piece that can play inside linebacker, can play on the edge. I think he can fill multiple needs for the Eagles, both short-term and long-term. And I think Howie Roseman just can't help himself. He always likes to make trades, and he traded up just one spot, maybe even just for the sake of doing it so he can keep the reputation. But overall, I think it was a great move for a stacked roster to add a versatile piece.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking too, Louis. Like, the Philadelphia Eagles are the kind of front office where, hey, if you just decide for kicks and giggles that you want to make a move just to kind of keep the rest of the league on its toes, you can certainly understand it. But you said it. I mean, just an embarrassment of riches, really, at just about every position on the defensive side of the ball, but particularly when you look at that linebacker core, you look at a Zach Bond, a Jeremiah Trotter Jr., and the Kobe Dean, and I could just go on and on. But when you look at that group, how do you feel Jahad Campbell's skill set can complement those players?
I think he fits in because he can do a little bit of everything. He was actually recruited to Alabama as an edge rusher, but because of depth, he moved inside. So I think they can use him as this almost like a mismatch, like Swiss Army knife of peace. Based on the team you play, you can use him on the edge more as a blitzer through the A gap, through the B gap. Also, Nakobe Dean's probably going to miss some time in the regular season after dealing with a season-ending injury that he suffered in the first round of the playoffs. He's in a contract year as well. Is Howie Roseman really going to pay 2 linebackers top 5, top 10 money as they extended Zach Bond? Probably not. So I do think it actually makes sense long-term as well for the inside linebacker spot. But for Campbell right now, you use him as a mismatch, and then I think you figure out what he does best, and that's what Vic Fangio's really good at, is developing young talent and finding their strengths.
Yeah, I got to give you so much credit. Just bringing up Zach Bond, just knowing what I saw in him being from New Orleans and just seeing what he didn't do with the Saints, but not of his own doing. And to see what Vic Fangio was able to do with him, you got to be absolutely positive and encouraged as an Eagles fan that he could potentially do the same with Campbell. Now, what I was mentioning earlier was that embarrassment of riches at linebacker for Vic Fangio as their defensive coordinator for the Eagles. So what does he need to do to get Campbell ready for day one? And obviously not going to necessarily be a starter, Lou, but just maybe getting him day one for whatever position they put him in for this Eagles team.
I think that's really it. Is last year they found Zach Bond's niche, and it was inside linebacker. Cooper DeJean they drafted to be, he was an outside corner at Iowa. They found out that he was more of a nickel corner. I think Fangio really needs to figure out, and I'm sure they've already been a step ahead in this process. They got to be comfortable with that part of it before drafting him and trading up for him. But figure out what he does best and really have him focus on one spot initially. Don't overload his plate. And then eventually, the better he gets, the more seasoning he gets, then you can start to move him around the formation. So I think that's the start, is focus on one position and then use him as a versatile piece. So I think that's the big job for Fangio.
And I think, too, having those guys out there, and like you said, even when you are looking at guys like Nakobe Dean or like a Nolan Smith dealing with injury, you know you have another piece kind of in, or another in the holster to be able to just kind of pull out as they do and just be so versatile as we've seen this defense of this Philadelphia Eagles team be. Appreciate the time, Louie. And for continuing coverage of the Eagles, subscribe to Locked On Eagles wherever you get your podcasts. For continuing coverage of the Eagles, subscribe to Locked On Eagles wherever you get your podcast. And for more on Jihad Campbell, let's hear from Locked On Bama host Luke Robinson, who spent a lot of time covering Jihad up close.
Jihad Campbell is going to surprise a lot of NFL players and teams with his versatility. I'm Luke Robinson with Locked On Bama, and Jihad Campbell has been one of the best players on Alabama's team these last 2 seasons. He's been incredibly versatile. He was recruited to Alabama as an edge. But, of course, you get to Alabama at that time when Nick Saban was still the coach. You got Will Anderson in front of you. You got Dallas Turner in front of you. And Jihad Campbell adapted. He became an off-ball linebacker, and he became a really, really good off-ball linebacker too. Very good in space. His coverage has certainly improved. He's got a propensity for some big plays. He made a huge one against Tennessee in Tuscaloosa, returning a fumble for a touchdown late in that contest. Jihad Campbell is going to be a very, very good pro. Again, check out Locked On Bama for more on anything relating to the Alabama Crimson Tide.
The pick is in.
With the 32nd pick, the Kansas City Chiefs select Josh Simmons, offensive lineman, Ohio State, presented by LinkedIn. Here to break this down with me is Chris Clark, one of the hosts over at Locked On Chiefs. And Chris, the Chiefs moved back in order to select Josh Simmons. The Eagles really wanted Jihad Campbell, so they made that one pick swap. And the Chiefs, they got their guy. Felt like this was a telegraph pick all the way through. Kansas City, we know, needed offensive line help. How are you feeling about the pick?
I feel great. The reality is he's not there if he doesn't get injured. So could be maybe the best offensive tackle in the class. Fantastic tape out of Ohio State, going up against great competition. So I think you have to feel really good about it if you're the Chiefs. And the fact that they have signed off on the medical means that they feel comfortable with where he is. The great thing about all of this is worst comes to worst and he's not able to start week 1. They already went out and got somebody. So you're still protected at that point. Obviously not what you want with your first round pick if you can't play, but this could be a redshirt year. Not thinking that it will be, but we'll see.
Yeah, and if it is, again, Kansas City still has options, as you mentioned. But talk to me about the – go ahead.
I was just going to say fifth-year option is huge with him too at left tackle. It's huge.
Yeah. Especially because we know it's a premium position, and having that extra option is massive. And the offensive line situation in Kansas City, Chris, as I mentioned, we all saw what happened in the Super Bowl. It was a huge need for Kansas City. They move off of Joe Thuney, trading him to Chicago. What if Josh Simmons is healthy? Let's just assume that he's able to come back at some point this season, week 1, wherever you want to put him. Where does Josh Simmons slide into this offensive line, and how are you feeling confidence-wise in the group Kansas City has assembled?
I think if Josh Simmons is going to be healthy and they want him to start week 1, I think that you're in a great position. It's not the best scenario for your best or for what you signed in the offseason, but you protected yourself. You didn't know if you were going to be able to get Josh Simmons or a guy that you felt could step in and start at left tackle. So I think Kansas City did what they needed to do. If they end up spending $15 million on a left tackle that doesn't play much because Josh Simmons comes in and just dominates, you're better off for it. You have a backup that can come in and help. And, worst case scenario, he's your backup for the year.
And now you have an opportunity for Kansas City to continue to add players as the draft goes on. Chris, where are you looking for Kansas City now with Josh Simmons on the board?
The big thing is I started watching defensive tackle, defensive end, and those started coming off the board quickly. And there was a huge run on both those positions. So it's going to be tough. If Kansas City stays where they are at 63 and 66, I don't know that they're going to be able to get somebody that they feel like can come in and help on the interior of the defensive line, which is, I think, really their other biggest need that they need to get figured out. So I'm wondering if they don't take one of the picks, maybe the pick that they got tonight at 164, and move up and try to get up a little bit further in the second round to maybe have a chance to go get a defensive tackle or a defensive end to help that defensive line.
And for continuing coverage of the Kansas City Chiefs, subscribe to Locked On Chiefs wherever you get your podcasts. And for more on Josh Simmons, let's hear from Locked On Buckeyes, who spend a lot of time covering Josh Simmons up close.
Josh Simmons has the rapid-fire quickness to excel as a left tackle in the National Football League. What is up, guys? My name is Jay Stevens, the host of Locked On Buckeyes. It's sitting at 6'5", 317 pounds. Josh Simmons' athleticism shows up all over the film, which is a big reason why he is a great left tackle in the screen game. He gets out in space. He's athletic enough to move from side to side, to move with the oncoming defender that's also in space, get his hands on him, and allow that lane to be a whole lot wider for the ball carrier right behind him. Josh Simmons also in pass pro, he does a great job with his first hit, getting first contact and sending the message early. So he's not playing catch up, but he's being the aggressor and taking control of that rep. Josh Simmons also, his quickness is going to allow him to provide an immediate impact and be a day one starter at the next level.